And let me welcome you to the fall quarterly meeting of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. My name is Evan Cope. I'm the chair of the commission. I appreciate everyone's patience with me. My house is approximately 35 miles from this office, and it took me an hour and 45 minutes to get here. So that is Interstate 24 for you. So anyway, I apologize for being late. In any event, let me I think the first order of business is to adopt the agenda for the meeting. So the chair will entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
We have a motion for Mr. Wilson, a second.
Second.
Ms. Coben, second. All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Take the roll.
Yeah. Oh, we need to take the roll, please.
Chairman Cope,
Here?
Dr. Dishner, Secretary Hargett,
Here.
Ms. Kadir. Great. Ms. Kadir. Ms. Coben. Mr. Lee. Treasurer Lillard.
Here.
Ms. Martin. Ms. Roach.
Here.
Mayor Wharton.
Here.
Comptroller Wilson.
I'm right here.
Mr. Keith Wilson. We have 11.
Very good. Quorum, we do have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the July 20th, 2016 meeting, and the chair will entertain a motion.
Chairman Cope,
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Dishner.
Oh, wait, we don't have a motion yet.
Oh, sorry.
We need a motion to approve the
Second.
second. Okay, very good. Aye.
Dr. Dishner. Secretary Hargett.
Aye.
Ms. Kadir. Ms. Coben.
Aye.
Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard.
Aye.
Ms. Martin. Ms. Roach.
Aye.
Mayor Wharton.
Aye.
Comptroller Wilson. Mr. Keith Wilson.
Aye.
We have 11.
Very good. The motion passes. I want to take this opportunity to recognize some special guests we have in the meeting. We have Dr. Elisa White from Austin P. Dr. White, will you raise your hand? Thank you for being here very much. And also Dr. Volpe, the President Emeritus of Tennessee THEC. Thank you for being here. As many of you may know, we are missing two commission members, but we're missing them for some good reasons. Commissioner David Kustoff was elected to Congress, as many of you know, this November, and so he's in Washington, D.C., being oriented to that world. And so we want to offer our congratulations to David. I emailed with him last night, and he's doing well and very excited. So we want to congratulate David, and we're definitely going to miss him. Also, Pam Martin is now on the board of Tennessee State University, and we congratulate her on that appointment and know she'll do a very good job serving Tennessee State University. So, Pam, congratulations if you're watching. Obviously, that leaves two positions open, and I understand Mike has been in communication with regard to those two positions, and the hope is to have those filled by our next quarterly meeting in January. Is that right, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And then finally, we have a new commission member, Mr. Jeremy Chisenhall. Is that right, Jeremy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Jeremy is a junior at Austin P. He's a political science, legal studies major, and he is from Knoxville, Tennessee. Welcome, Jeremy. Those are my comments. I'll turn it over to Mike now at this point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief. We have a lot of work to do today. I do want to, by way of my first meeting here, thank the Commission for the last 90 days. I think you all have seen and have been part of what has been an introspective time for us to think through where we are as a Commission. You all have lives outside of THEC that we're very aware of, and we always want to try to strike the balance in these meetings of being respectful of your time, but also having the necessary time to deal with what are very, very weighty issues. And so we're trying something new today. We're showing up. We're at 10 o'clock in the morning. We're in regular session. As you'll see, we have a much leaner agenda than we would typically have. And we hope that will give us the time to really dig into really what's a very fiscally focused meeting. The other thing, too, I hope you've seen over the last 90 days and that we'll continue to do is to make sure that these meetings aren't the only thing that being a THEC commissioner is about. First, having a dialogue with each of you in advance of the meeting so you're fully acquainted with what are very technical pieces of material. And second, having a chance to get out on campuses, meet our students, and kind of connect with why we do what we do. That question about why we do what we do has been one that we have been working through as a staff here. And I want to share briefly kind of the framework for a plan of action. And I don't think you'll see this become a 30-page strategic plan. I often worry sometimes that 30-page strategic plans aren't generally read beyond the first page. So we've worked on putting together the first page, which is a plan of action. When I first started in this position, the questions I asked our staff, what are we about? What's our vision? And you'll see that statement kind of sums up what we're seeking to do. We're going to be focused on increasing the number of Tennesseans with a college degree. But the how we get there is something that we have worked through an iterative process. We had a retreat of our leadership team. We had the planning and professional development session with many of you. And so when we think about being relentlessly focused on the number of Tennesseans with a college degree, the buckets that get us there are here on the screen. And these sum up what THEC and THEC, because as you all know, we are really a functionally merged agency. We're going to create and maintain a policy environment focused on the Drive to 55, and really the undertone there is a policy environment focused on students. We're going to innovate for student access and success. We have, as I'm sure you have learned, some of the brightest staff working on higher education policy anywhere in the country, turning them loose to say, what can we do to increase student success? We've been doing that, by the way, in many ways. This memorializes it as a key part of our vision moving forward. And then protecting students and consumers. And I think the difference between, I hope, this plan of action and others is when we live this every day, protecting students and consumers. None of us could have anticipated ITT Technical Institute completely closing. And in a matter of days, our staff, Dr. Beller Chase and her team, Scott Sloan working with the legislature, Kate Derrick, our communications director, we had managed to reach out to all 1,900 ITT students in a matter of days. So that nimble response with students at the center is something that we'll continue to do, but I really think it's central to everything we do. Obviously, none of these buckets matter if we can't show you progress, though. And so obviously there's a set of metrics that we'll be watching closely. And under each of these areas, this is a work in progress, by the way, and in January we hope to bring you kind of the final document. But in these large kind of stratified areas, we'll be tracking ourselves in each of these areas. And I'd also say tracking this progress isn't just a proxy for THEC's success, it's a proxy for the state's higher education health. How are we doing in each of these four areas? The first area is one that I know Dr. Hayburn's excited about because she and I think, have tried to link arms to really be focused on a couple of common goals around K-12 and higher ed. And we're going to share some K-12 metrics with the Board of Education as is appropriate. Student progress is something that I don't know that any other state in America is poised to track the way we do, because student progress is how we fund our institutions. And we'll talk more about that later. Our graduate outcomes also linked to our formula. And then finally, workforce development, making sure that when students graduate, they're able to enter into the middle income wage band and go to work and support a family. So I present all that to you just to say these are the early kind of the kernel of where I think we can end up. In January, we'll have a more full document, but I wanted to at least be able to show you, I think we're on a glide slope to address one of the challenges THEC has, and that is people aren't quite sure what we do sometimes. Being able to summarize that succinctly is something we're working towards. I want to take a couple points of personal privilege, and then I promise you I'm finished. One, want to thank both systems, Chancellor Gregory and Dr. DiPietro and Dr. High. Dr. Deaton and I were out of state about a month ago at a conference with other states, and I will just tell you, it is not a normal course of business to have as good a relationship as the coordinating agency has with their boards. And I think Dennis would agree with that. The fact that we're able to work together seamlessly, I am grateful for. We're going to be really focused on working with our General Assembly too. The legislature, as you all know, have a very unique perspective because they are directly tied to tens of thousands of constituents. And we're going to maintain a constant dialogue with them. And though many of them are not here, or any of them, we're appreciative of the support we've received really the last several years, beginning with Complete College Tennessee Act, moving through Drive to 55. Finally, our team. We have an incredible staff. I hope you as the commission are getting to know them better, and it'll be our goal to get you in situations where you're able to see what they do every day. But we have an incredible team here. We learned a few weeks ago when we got to share a little bit about ourselves, we have a lot of first-generation college students on this team. or we have people whose parents were first-generation college students, and that informs the work we do. I'm proud to say that we're not a bureaucracy. Everybody here is doing this because they really believe in helping Tennesseans have a better life through higher ed. So I'm proud to be part of this team more than anything. That's all I have, Chairman.
Mike, thank you very, very much. And I want to offer my thanks on behalf of the commissioners to you, Mike, for your work so far. And I can speak for all of us, I think, when I say we're very excited about you being here and the good work you're going to do. So thank you for that. Next, the commission will receive the system reports, and I'll call on Chancellor Gregory if you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and
Yes,
good
sir.
morning to the commissioners, and welcome to new Commissioner Chisenhall. Welcome to the commission. I really maybe three things to say this morning, and I'll commit to being brief to those. And they may sound just a little bit repetitive to you, but they're probably worth saying. One is I want to talk to you a few minutes about the commitment of the system itself, and then I want to talk to you about Focus Act transition, and then I'll just finish with sort of what's trending. So first of all, on what's driving us still, it is the student success agenda inside the Board of Regents system. We're focused on credential production. We're focused on the number of 43,202 credentials to be produced by 2025. If you ask any of the member institutions of the Board of Regents, they will know what their piece of that goal is. I know my colleague to the right in the UT system, they're focused as well on this whole agenda of credential production. As we've said before, it takes a different kind of work to be done. It means that we're impacting students in some different ways than we have before. Identifying deficiencies early, trying to remediate those deficiencies, trying to get young people on a path early on, making course decisions, making decisions around their majors early on. We know that the more students wiggle away and wiggle around, the less likely they are to complete. So students enrolling in the Board of Regents institutions all have an academic focus when they enroll in a Board of Regents institution. So they may not know their major, but they at least know a major field for which they think they're interested in. And we know that students taking courses in that area of focus quickly are more likely to get across the finish line. And that's where our goals are. So getting them to declare an area of focus early is a point of emphasis for us. Getting them into that area of focus helps the students to refine for themselves a better course of action. We've spoken to you several times around the whole idea of remediation and co-requisite remediation. I just would tell you that continues to have success in our system, and we're seeing and reaping the results of students being able to continue in a course-bearing class and get the remediation they need early on and staying on path. In order to do that again, that cuts down time to degree, and the more we can cut down time to a degree, the better off we are. So those, as well as a number of other sort of innovative approaches, are trying to get students on a path and keep them on a path. We have many early alert systems that are in place so that we can see students who are missing class early and intervene with coaching and intervene with other mechanisms to try to get them back onto that path. So that work, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, that's what drives not one institution of the Board of Regents, but all the institutions of the Board of Regents. And it's not a slogan. I would challenge you, if you go to our institutions and you talk to somebody, pick somebody, you'll see that they too are interested in student success and student success in a way that maybe we haven't thought about it before. Let me talk to you just a few minutes about the Focus Act transition. I think you would be proud of the TBR universities. They are doing the work they need to do and are ready to stand up their own boards. You may know this requires a substantive change at SACS. They're all heading together there in December. They have both filed their prospectus and also filed their amendments now, knowing who their governors will be. Their work has largely been around the development of policy. Each of the 6 TBR institutions will be able to, as one of the early orders of business, establish their own set of policies. We've sort of backstopped that with the TBR policies, and so the TBR policies are in place until they adopt their own, which they will do very early on. So I would tell you that transition work, I believe, is going smooth. It also is allowing the Board of Regents system to begin thinking about what our role will be, what our system looks like after the institutions stand up. We'll be going around this fall. We met with Dr. White and her team on Friday. We'll be meeting with Dr. McPhee and his team on Monday, and we'll be ensuring that this transition is effectuated in a smooth fashion. And then finally, a little bit on what's trending. Fall enrollments for us were essentially flat, but that really doesn't tell the story. The story is really kind of 2 things. One is an increase in first-time freshmen. The promise is still producing us more students, but we're losing adults. And the loss of adult population in our system is a little bit of a mixed story. In some respects, it's good for the state because we know that when we're losing adults, people are typically going back to work, and that's a good thing. For us, however, it challenges us to think about how can we attract people, particularly those people who are in the workforce, who have hit a ceiling in terms of what their current skill set will allow them to do and to earn, and how can we attract them back in a fashion where we can help them to even further their education. That takes flexibility on our part. The kinds of things that adult learners face, the challenges they face, or don't allow them to sort of drop out of life and come back in and just sort of enroll in a full-time set of courses and move forward. So, Mr. Chairman, that's I think our challenge going forward is thinking about how we continue to attract adults back into our system. So, thank you for the opportunity to system report.
Any questions for Chancellor Gregory? Dr. Hyde?
Good morning. Dr. DiPietro, yes, thank you. Dr. DiPietro regrets he could not be with you this morning, but as I go through the remarks, I think you'll understand what he's up to today. This is a good news report. First thing I'll say is that bachelor degree production is up at the University of Tennessee on all of our campuses. We're very, very close to meeting the THEC Master's Plan goals, and I don't think I would be out of place to say I think within the next year, if things go as predicted, we will exceed our goals. David said we're paying attention, and we are. Freshman applications are up on all campus, and first-year retention is up on all of our campuses. We've also made good on our promise to keep tuition increases in line with the Higher Education Price Index. We've done that for 2 consecutive years, and we'll do it for the 3rd year in 2017. What we've done 2 years ago, President DiPietro pulled together a group of trustees and administrators, and he called it the Budget Advisory Group, and they came up with some parameters. And we have lived within those parameters for the last 2 years, and we have been able to reallocate $68 million within the University of Tennessee, take it away from things that were not effective and put them toward things that we considered more effective. He's reconstituting that group, and we're going to have more trustee involvement with that group, and he expects to have them together for their first new meeting in December. We have been searching, and we have some new appointments in place. UT Martin Chancellor, Dr. Keith Carver, who I consider one of my mentees, if not one of my children, will be the new chancellor at UT Martin. He will take that job on January 3rd. He's excited, they're excited. We're both excited and kind of sad because he'll be leaving the system staff. We have a new chief financial officer. His name is David Miller, and he will be joining us in January. He comes from the University of Wisconsin system, and he brings extensive financial and higher education experience with him. Dr. Tanja Johnson, who was on Joe's staff, has a new position. She hoped to be here today, and I was going to introduce her to everybody who does not know her. She has been named Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for the UT system. She's going to be responsible for our strategic plan. She's going to also be working very closely with our capital projects. Several people asked about UT Knoxville Chancellor position. We had finalists come in for interviews about a week ago, and one of the reasons that Joe is not here is that they're working on the final details to bring back at least one of the candidates for a second interview, and we're playing that logistics dance where we're trying to get everybody together quickly. But we hope to have somebody to recommend to the board before the end of this calendar year. We also have an interim chancellor at the Institute of Agriculture. Tim Cross is serving that role right now, but we have 7 candidates coming in for interviews for that position. And again, we hope to recommend a candidate to the board by mid-December. So we have been very busy trying to, what I call, do party planning to get all those meetings set up and pulled off. And since Keith Carver is taking the job as Chancellor at UT Martin, we are looking for a new executive assistant to the president, and we had 4 candidates apply for that position, and we hope to make a decision in that position by the end of this month, which is coming up very quickly. I've got 3 brag points about our campuses, and then if you will allow me, I would like to brag on David Gregory.
We only have an hour, so.
Earlier this month, the UT Board of Trustees voted to name the College of Engineering at UT Knoxville the Tickle College of Engineering in support of the donations that received from John Tickle. That's the only second time in our 222-year history that we have named a college for a person. The other, obviously, is the Haslam College of Business. UTC, I think David asked me about dual admissions and articulation agreements with the community colleges. UTC has just signed an articulation agreement with Motlow State so that honors students at Motlow can transfer seamlessly into the honors program at UT Chattanooga. And then UT Martin ranked 17th on the best bang for the buck on the Southern Colleges list. So we're proud of the fact that we're able to keep the tuition affordable as much as possible for the students in that part of the state. And now here comes the brag on David. Okay. A couple weeks ago, Dr. DiPietro got an invitation from David and said, we're going around the state and we're having briefings with the 4-year institutions. We're going to talk about the Focus Act and some other things. We're going to talk about funding. We're going to talk about the legislative session coming up, and we're going to talk about transfers. And would the University of Tennessee campuses be interested in having those briefings? And we jumped on it. And so in the next couple weeks, we're going to be having briefings on all of our campuses. David is coming. He's bringing all of his senior leadership. And we're going to focus on the mechanics of transfers, what's working, what is not, where do we need to oil the machine, and how do we go about finding those adults, how do we go about finding those students who stopped out before they completed a degree, how do we, this is going to be on the agenda, David, how do we figure out that how to get students in the community college to give us permission to look at their academic record so that we can possibly award them a reverse transfer degree. Okay, we want to bolster that. We had success with the reverse transfer program last year. We want to have tremendous success with it going forward. So, and we'll need your help with that one. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Any questions for Dr. Hunt?
Evan, I would just like to applaud both Chancellor Gregory and Dr. High on the getting all the universities together. That is so helpful, so wonderful for the students of this state, and especially as we embark on the Focus Act. It's wonderful to have already gotten that started. And I would say thank you.
Secretary, okay.
Yes, sir.
Chancellor Gregory, Mike had mentioned to me, and it's a good point. Would you mind updating the commission on this search for the next chancellor?
Glad to.
Yes, sir.
Governor Haslam was actually chairing the search for my replacement, and we are in the midst of that process now. Statute provides that the candidates can remain anonymous up until the point in which you name finalists. So within the next few weeks, you'll see a minimum of 3 finalists, maybe more, named at that point in time. Then we'll be looking to get those finalists an opportunity to meet our presidents, our TCAT directors. There are a couple of other people here in the room that are actually serving on the search as well. And then the hope, Mr. Chairman, would be to try to get someone on early into 2017 as a new chancellor for the board.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I think it's going well.
Very good. Thank you both for the reports. Next, Mike, unless you have anything else, we're at the action item portion of our agenda, and item 1 is post-secondary state authorization.
And before Dr. Beller Chase and Julie get up there, so let me just orient the commission to what is a new agenda approach, certainly. We typically would have been in a work session in the morning, and then in the afternoon would have been in regular session. After some conversations with you all, we're kind of going this course of we're in regular session now, but we also think that gives us time for unhurried discussion. And when you see the items that are going to be before us today, I think that's essential. So little different approach. What I hope, though, certainly is that interaction that used to happen in the work session would like to happen now. And the things we're going to be dealing with ranging from, we're about to talk about an entirely new way of authorization that you all are familiar with that was passed last year by the General Assembly. Dr. Beller Chase and Julie will brief you on really that pathway that they've constructed to comply with the legislation. And then we'll move into the fiscal part of our discussion. Again, I would just encourage, I think the work sessions in my years at THEC have typically been more interactive, and then the regular session felt a little more mechanical. We're asking for interaction because this is the session. I can assure you there will be brownies in the middle of it from Ray's. That was the one imperative I heard from the commission. So they will be present, and with that, we'll certainly defer to Dr. Beller Chase.
Very good.
Mr. Kraus, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, good morning. So we have, I have 2 action items for your consideration today. The first action items are in section 1A and 1B, and they are recommendations from the Committee on Post-Secondary Educational Institutions. They've recommended that the 34 institutions and the 71 new programs be given temporary authorization and approval respectively. And that is the regular authorization path that we've been doing since I've been here, since 1974, really. So that's the first action item.
I guess we'll, unless there's an objection, we'll take each item as it arises on the agenda, and we'll do a roll call. Yes, sir. All right, so item 1A on your agenda is authorization of new institutions. The chair will entertain a motion.
For approval.
A motion, and we have a second for Ms. Coben. All right, any discussion on this particular item? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Chairman Cope.
Aye.
Dr. Dishner. Secretary Hargett.
Aye.
Ms. Kadir. Ms. Coben. Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard.
Aye.
Ms. Roach. Aye. Mayor Wharton.
Aye.
Comptroller Wilson. Mr. Keith Wilson.
Aye.
We have 10. Motion carried.
Very good. Dr. Beller Chase.
And so that was before the initial and the new program, the vote you all just took. Okay. So as Mr. Kraus said, in the legislature last session, there was a new bill passed, and it's the Tennessee Higher Education Authorization Act of 2016. Prior to this act, we had been working on the Higher Education Authorization Act of 1974. And what this act did essentially, it was some big changes, but the biggest one was there's now a tract called optional expedited authorization. And it's different from the traditional authorization in that it's a less hands-on approach from the staff, but there's criteria that you have to meet to be part of that. So you have to be a degree-granting accredited institution. Your accreditor has to be recognized by the U.S. Department of Education. You have to submit to us a comprehensive complaint process. You have to submit evidence that you're eligible for Title IV funding. You also have to submit evidence that you're in good, not only that you're accredited, but you're in good standing. So what we did is logistically, we came up with a new application and we tried to define what does good standing mean and, what does it mean to be operating lawfully in Tennessee. So for the first batch of optional expedited authorization institutions, there's 53 of them, and they're listed in Section 1C.
Just to give a little context, yes, sir, 1C will be the listing of all the institutions. So in a sense, what the General Assembly asked us to do is have a traditional authorization track, much the same we've always had, and then there's a fast lane. The work that's been done to make sure, though, that even though you're on the fast lane, there are still protections for students, I think is worth noting. One, the optional expedited authorization we're about to consider for these schools is a privilege that can be revoked under certain circumstances that we clearly outline. So I think that in the main, what this is doing is allowing colleges that have some established measure of quality, typically via accreditation, to combine with other data points that Dr. Chase mentioned. And that gives us, we hope, our authorization staff the time to do the traditional authorization on the schools that aren't on this slate. And certainly, if at any time one of these schools gives us reason to believe that optional expedited authorization should be revoked, we would bring that before the commission.
All right, so to be clear, we're voting on item 1C, is that right, Dr. Belichase? Okay. The chair will entertain a motion then on that item.
So moved.
A motion from Commissioner Roach. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mayor Wharton. Any discussion on this agenda item? Yes, sir.
I have a question. I've looked at these accrediting organizations, and I'm not familiar with them all. Are y'all satisfied that these are legitimate organizations and gone through the review not only of the schools themselves, but the accrediting organizations?
Yes, sir. And to be an accreditor considered here, you have to be on the United States Department of Education list of accreditors.
Is that it, or is there an additional?
That's the standard to be considered a valid accreditor.
So that's the standard we use?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Do these institutions all have a physical presence in the areas listed?
Some of them are distance learning only, but they create a physical presence if they are advertising and recruiting Tennessee students.
Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Cope.
Aye.
Dr. Dishner. Secretary Hargett. Ms. Kadir. Ms. Coben.
Aye.
Mr. Lee. Treasurer Lillard. Ms. Roach. Aye. Mayor Wharton.
Aye.
Comptroller Wilson.
Aye, Steve.
Mr. Keith Wilson.
Aye.
We have 10 ayes, motion carried.
Very good. Thank you. All right, Julie, rule revisions. This is item 1D in your packet.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Cope, Mr. Kraus, and Commission members. I'm trying not to repeat too much of what we just discussed about, but obviously these rules deal in large part with the optional expedited authorization and the other provisions of the Higher Education Authorization Act that affected all of our institutions and the work of the Division of Post-Secondary State Authorization in general. So I'll just remind you that in order to ensure a smooth transition into the HEAA and everything it entails, on July 20th, you considered a version of proposed rules for purposes of submitting those for emergency rules as well as notice of rulemaking hearing rules to the Secretary of State's office. You approved a version of the rules on that date. As a result of that, we submitted those rules to the Attorney General for his review and approval. Once he approved them and all signatures were appropriately secured, we then filed those at the Secretary of State's office. The emergency rules were effective on October 3rd and will expire on April 1st of 2017 unless we have permanent rules that are effective prior to that date. In order to get permanent rules, that's where the notice of rulemaking hearing comes into to play. The notice of rulemaking hearing was filed and set October 6th as the due date for filing written comments on the rules, as well as the rulemaking hearing date. THEC convened the rulemaking hearing as noticed. During the rulemaking process, we received comments from 6 institutions or their parent entities, as well as 1 law firm. As a result of these comments, further review of the rules and just the initial implementation of our emergency rules, we found that there were additional revisions needed to be made, some, not many, some revisions needed to be made to the July 20th version of the rules you've previously looked at. Those revisions generally were typographical or grammatical. There were some statutory citation updates simply as a result of the HEAA codified. There were some revisions needed just for clarification purposes, and there were also some of the comments that we adopted and changes that needed to be made as a result of those. The additional revisions are highlighted in the red line of recommended final rule revisions that are included in your materials. Additionally, DPSA put together some responses to the comments we received, and those responses to the comments are included in your materials as well, specifically because you will have to adopt those. Those responses are part of the rulemaking process and are filed with the Secretary of State's office along with the rules. So on November 2nd, our Committee on Post-Secondary Educational Institutions looked at these very same rules and the same responses to the comments, and they voted unanimously to adopt those for the purposes of your consideration and approval today. So based on this information, it is our recommendation that the Commission vote to 1, adopt the attached red line of recommended final rule revisions and the responses to comments for the purposes of submitting the rulemaking hearing rules filing form to the Attorney General for review, and 2, to direct the Executive Director to make any non-substantive changes to the rules required by the Attorney General before submitting the rulemaking hearing rules filing form to the Tennessee Secretary of State. So Chairman Cope, we do require a roll call, although I think we're doing that for every item on this agenda, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Thank you, Julie. You've heard the recommendation of staff, and at this point in time, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt the recommendation of staff as stated.
So move.
This motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor? Well, so I'm sorry, call the roll, please.
Chairman Cope,
Aye.
Dr. Dishner, Secretary Hargett.
Aye.
Ms. Kadir. Ms. Coben.
Aye.
Mr. Lee. Treasurer Lillard. Ms. Roach.
Aye.
Mayor Wharton.
Aye.
Comptroller Wilson.
Absolutely.
Mr. Keith Wilson.
Aye.
We have 11 ayes, motion carried.
Very good. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
All right. Next, item 2A, approval of new academic programs, and we'll call on Betty for that.
Good morning, everyone. I direct your attention to Agenda Item 2A that's in your notebook for the new academic program at Middle Tennessee State University. And MTSU proposes to offer both a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science in Religious Studies. For the past 30 years, MTSU has offered a Religious Studies minor. In recent years, MTSU has identified religious studies as an institutional priority with the hiring of 2 tenure-track faculty. These energetic faculty members have been very instrumental in receiving grants that have assisted in the expansion of the religious studies program as it relates both to curriculum development as well as assessment. The Religious Studies program is aligned with MTSU's mission of preparing students to thrive in a changing global society. The proposed Religious Studies program seeks to prepare graduates that will be independent and critical thinkers, equipped with the methods and theories necessary to study religious phenomena. Like other humanities programs, Religious Studies graduates will have a wide range of career opportunities in which writing, communication, critical thinking, and teamwork will be essential skills. The only additional resources that will be needed to implement the program are faculty. There will be adjunct faculty that will be needed in years 1 and 2, and then one additional faculty member will be hired in year 3 that would broaden the program focus to include a more Eastern view of religion. There is sufficient library and other support resources that are available for program implementation, which is scheduled to begin fall of 2017. The program proposal has undergone a rigorous campus as well as governing board review, as well as the required external consultant, who was Dr. Stephen Berkowitz from Missouri State University, and he conducted a very thorough site visit that occurred this past May. TBR approved the Religious Studies program at their September board meeting, and the THEC staff recommends approval of the Religious Studies program at Middle Tennessee State University. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Betty? Thank you.
I'll just say, Chairman, I know that the board, you all hear a lot of these, and I'll just tell you that this is a lot of the meat of what is ahead for the Focus Act. As institutions bring us academic degree proposals, this process becomes central. One of the things we'll be asking campuses to do is, of course, pursue their individual mission, but always keep in mind these statewide goals. And I will just tell the Commission, the road ahead on academic programs is probably more rather than less complex. And the framework that Betty follows with this, it's worth noting those site visits, Betty goes on those, or Pam goes on those. And we're sitting in the room as THEC listening to a consultant telling us this program can work or not. And let's be clear, there are site visits where they don't come away with a positive recommendation. So just know that this framework is the one that I think becomes even more important. We've gotten, I think, an incredible cohort of presidents at these universities that are going to get their own boards, but I think a very realistic view is that at some point there's going to be an academic program that I think this process illuminates how we can either make it better or make sure it's more closely aligned with the state interest. So it's, given what's coming with Focus Act, I just wanted to highlight that and thank Betty certainly for, this is a very thorough, this is an audit process that occurs, really a de facto audit.
Mike, can I add one thing to that?
Please.
In theory, the proposal goes to the campus process, and then it goes to the Board of Trustees, and then it gets approved by THEC. But in practical terms, we are working so closely with THEC all along that no proposal ever goes to our board until we're 99.6% sure that it's going to be approved by THEC. So you've got the linear progression, and then you've got the actual work that occurs. So we work real closely with Betty, and she's great to work with. I would say you might consider yourself a bureaucracy, but
Mike,
Obviously now under focus, these programs that used to come through the Board of Regents now come directly to the Commission, and that's a significant difference. So to touch on what Mike said, and we did touch on this also in our workshop. Sorry, I was microphone.
just a point of curiosity more than anything, I suppose. It sounds counterintuitive to me to have a Bachelor of Science degree in religious studies, and other than foreign language, what difference would that have if you know? I mean, it strikes me as odd.
Mr. Wilson, you have already answered the question. The difference between the Bachelor of Arts and the Bachelor of Science is the foreign language requirement. And for those students who desires not to seek a foreign language, then that option of the Bachelor of Science is available, and the student ends up taking additional electives.
Okay.
Other questions? Any questions of Betty? If not, we'll entertain a motion on this item.
Move approval.
Commissioner Coben.
Second.
Second from Comptroller Wilson. We will do a roll call. Please, ma'am.
Commissioner Cope.
Aye.
Dr. Dishner. Secretary Hargett. Ms. Kadir. Ms. Coben. Mr. Lee. Treasurer Lillard.
Aye.
Ms. Roach. Aye. Mayor Wharton.
Aye.
Comptroller Wilson.
Certainly.
Mr. Keith Wilson.
Aye.
We have 11 ayes. Motion carried.
Very good. Thanks, Betty. Next, we are At item 3 on the agenda, which is the Drive to 55 Capacity Building Fund recommendations, Mike.
This is a bit of an evolution that started actually in this boardroom 2 years ago as we were talking about how could we think of capital differently. And Dennis was a part of that conversation. And I think the idea and the thought at the time was our traditional capital process, I think, does a really good job, and we'll get to that later today, in hitting those huge ticket, massive capital investment projects. But what if we had a more nimble investment fund that's able to address employer needs directly and, very frankly, able to address some of the TCAT capacity needs that I think we're all very aware of? That gave birth to the idea of the Drive to 55 Capacity Fund. We were fortunate that the General Assembly and the governor put that into the budget last year at $24.2 million. What unfolded from then until now, we're going to let Stephen Gentile walk you through the process. But I'll just say that this is the definition of innovation. This is a new idea. And I hope that when you see this slate, we had $124 million worth of proposals, you are struck by one, the idea was validated. People responded to this, obviously. 2, the process of grant evaluation that goes on here at THEC is one I strongly believe in. It is transparent, and we are able to tell a grantee or someone who was not selected why that occurred. What we'll do is ask Stephen and also Dr. Deaton to walk us through the process that unfolded and how we arrived at this slate. And I really hope you will look at each of these projects, because in July we heard you. You wanted to hear about the number of students served and what that investment looked like. You wanted to hear about the tie to the workforce. I think we've got a pretty complex set of projects configured the right way for discussion. So with that, defer to Stephen.
Thank you, Director Krause, Chairman Cope, and Commissioners. Before we get started, I want to thank, again, Dr. Deaton, Dr. High, my fellow bureaucrats, Crystal Collins and Taylor Odell, for helping out with this process.
Strike that from today's meeting, please. It'd be good.
We're helping out thoroughly. We did receive a lot of responses, and I'm going to be relying on a lot of colleagues to help with this process with the information. We've released our RFP back in June of this year, requesting letters of intent to come to us by mid-July. We received a healthy response of 47. The actual proposals were due October 7. Between July and October 7, we anticipated a drop-off from that 47 letters of intent, and indeed we had a drop-off down to 44 proposals, so another healthy response there. Of those 44 proposals, we had a rather healthy response across the state, receiving 16 proposals from the east, 15 from the middle, 13 from the west. 22 of the 27 TCATs responded with the proposal, 8 of the 9 universities, all 13 community colleges, and 1 non-formal unit, UT Institute of Agriculture. As Dr. Krause mentioned, nearly $124 million in request came about. And as you might remember from our July commission meeting, we required each proposal to identify whether one of 2 different tracks. One was program expansion, and the other was new capital construction, major renovation. That was one category. Program expansion, if you remember the LEAP grant process we've done in the past, it was very similar to LEAP, where they would use that money to purchase new equipment, do a small-scale renovation perhaps of a wing of a current building. That was program expansion. The other classification, new capital construction, major renovation, this is more traditional, what you might think of capital outlay projects we've had in the past, but smaller scale, perhaps constructing a new facility, acquiring a new facility to add to the campus, or overhauling an actual current building that changes the scope and function of that building. Those 2 different tracks, because they're very different, required different weightings on the rubric. Each rubric for both classifications had the same components, but because we're looking at the new capital project building for a new capital construction, major renovation, sustainability was very important there because that's going to have new staff, for instance. So we had a higher weighting on that component compared to different components for program expansion. I say that because you'll see differences in the scope when we talk about the different projects. To give you an idea, that $120 million, where they fell, for program expansions, we received 19 proposals at a total request of $15 million. For new capital construction major renovation, nearly $110 million with 25 proposals. So you can get the sense that that second category had higher project requests. We acquired 18 readers from different departments and agencies of state government, including the Department of Economic and Community Development, Department of Labor and Workforce Development, Department of Human Services, Department of Education, TBR, UT, and THEC. Each proposal received 3 reads. And that happened between October 7 and October 26. On October 26 in this room, all of the readers came together and the heads of those agencies and departments and talked about the scores. And we came across after that with the certification of the rank order of the scores as the RFP outlined so that we can show those to you now.
And Stephen, just to clarify, the first read was a blind read, which was intentional. We wanted scorers scoring independently so that when they came to the table to collectively discuss, though, they showed up with a score already. And we think that builds in a really important partition. It's remarkable when you see the grants that scored high, they scored pretty tightly too, just to be honest. 3 scorers reading independently generally came to very similar conclusions. When you get towards the middle of the pack, you start to see the range get larger, where maybe one scorer didn't have the same viewpoint. Grant reading, we try to make it as scientific as we can. I just wanted to highlight that blind reading matters.
Thank you. Thank you. So we met, certified the scores, and in your part 3 of your commission folder, you can see those scores in a rank order, but we provided a much more legible color copy for you guys in front of you now, and that is also on the screen in front of you. Also in part 3, we provided abstracts for not all the proposals, but all the proposals that scored an 80 and above. We didn't want to inundate you with all 44 proposal abstracts. That said, I have a copy of on me of all the abstracts of all proposals. We are prepared to answer any and all questions that you might have.
Let me ask the commission, what feels most helpful? Because there's no doubt this is a lot of information. What would be the most helpful way to progress? Stephen, let me throw out a suggestion. Walk us through, say, TCAT Shelbyville up. Okay. Brief summaries of where we're at, and maybe that'll seed a discussion about the projects. Again, the high scores, they scored pretty high by all their readers. That's the reason they're towards the top of the list.
There's no real substantive difference between a 93 and a 94, though, really, is there?
There's no doubt that is a pretty narrow window.
Yeah, I see a 93.3 and a 93.3. One's ranked second, the other third is, there's no substantive difference in these kinds of things. It's just the way the votes were divided and totaled and composite. Right.
Yes,
I would say that, I didn't provide all the columns for you in that spreadsheet. We would consider that a tie here as number 2 tied. So, right, and so let me go quickly through this spreadsheet here. I just revealed a lot more than I intended, so give me a second here. I have a lot of information here if you want to go into it, but I'm trying to shield you from that, for this process. So looking at the actual spreadsheet in front of you, you can see in column D the sector, the grand division, the classification of the proposal. I provided for you an abbreviated project title that can give you a sense of what the project is.
Oh, yeah, that would be.
Okay. Distressed counties, the Department of Economic and Community Development has a designation for counties that are distressed, that are in severe need of workforce capacity. In this column here, I outline whether these projects are actually in that area or are a border county to that. I'm going to thank Madison Dell for doing that for us. At the July Commission meeting, we asked about students served. How many students are served per proposal? On the cover sheet of the proposal, we get that information, and I put that here for you. That is not exactly the same as the actual students graduated, how many students graduated. So down through the first 14 dozen or so projects, we have included in here what number they gave us for having graduated if it was available.
Well, that's potential graduates, correct?
Exactly. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
2 years, 4 years, I guess it varies.
I would view that as an imperfect measure,
Yes.
Pam.
Yeah.
Student served does matter, though. I think that's an important measure. Students graduated, you're starting to ask a grant writer to forecast multiple years out. Stephen, talk us through what these projects do, starting with Memphis.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, of course.
We're talking about students served. Tell me how that weighed into the scoring.
That was not a specific part of the criteria in the student survey. However, in the comments in the rubrics, that is something that is a part of the proposal. And so when you're thinking about there's actually a component of the proposal that is Drive to 55 goals. To what extent are the proposals meeting the Drive 55 goals? And that is an increased accreditation of students and also those degrees aligning with the workforce. So that is where you would see information about students served and students graduated by the readers.
For example, distressed counties, I would say any category that we look at, let us know, was it actually part of the rubric toward making decisions?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Distressed counties was not a part of the rubric.
And we try to include that to give some context.
Yeah.
Once you start seeing things like 93.3s, and this will be especially important because as we work down the list, we'll start getting to a territory where we feel like funds are probably close and scores are close too. So that was the thought behind that. But we'll definitely delineate. In fact, Crystal's getting copies of the rubric for everyone right now, so you can see exactly what the scores used.
Thank you. So yeah, let's go ahead and start off with the TCAT Memphis proposal and what that is. And that is our highest scored. And you can see in the column U that I give a range of how the three scorers scored. So this one in particular was a high of a 98, a low of a 90. Give you an idea of how tight those reads were. And that is an indication to me that those readers really valued this project. So TCAT Memphis, as you can read in the abstract, this will be a new satellite campus in Bartlett, Tennessee, which is in East Shelby County. There'll be a new building of about 18 to 22,000 square feet, and will train up to 180 full-time students and 180 part-time students in the medical device sector. The different areas of study would be machine tool technology, industrial maintenance, and welding technology. And they project by 2025 an addition of totally 1,600 post-secondary credentials. They're also receiving $1 million from the city of Bartlett, an additional $1 million from the Gene Haas Foundation that will make this the first Haas designated training center in the Mid-South, training for those areas I already mentioned. They have a partnership with the Greater Memphis Medical Device Council, and this will serve as an official training center for that council. They are also partnering with Bartlett High School and Southwest Career and Technical Center. This will be a dual enrollment program of machine tool technology. And that is this program in a nutshell. Any questions?
For purposes of thinking through how we're going to handle this, if we voted on the projects in order, and we've got $24 million to spend, is that right? And if we voted on a slate, how far down the spreadsheet would we get in terms of funding if we went from top to bottom?
And Mr. Krause has prompted me to go through TCAT Shelbyville, and you'll see when we get to volunteer state, we're at $22.2 million. The TCAT Shelbyville is nearly $5 million, would put us over a good bit of that $24.25 million.
Is there any consideration or thought given after the fact that we would fund less than a request and for any reason?
Great point, and I want Russ to join in on this discussion because that is the will of the commission. Need to be very clear. I think the staff recommendation given, so for a program expansion, I would feel more comfortable with partial recommendations. With the building projects, it's hard to build 3/4 of a building. So, Stephen, if you'll highlight through Vol State, so in theory, and again, this is the whole will of the commission, but in theory, if we went in rank order through Vol State, we would have expended $22.2 million, have followed really the rank scoring in total. We've got to talk then, and I defer to the commission on where to proceed there, because there's a couple different options, if that's the route you all wanted to go.
I have a question. What if we went through this, we didn't fund the whole thing, or we did fund the whole thing and someone fell out? Do we need to have alternates in case one does not pursue it after the grant?
What our RFP typically states is that I think we reserve the right to then go down to the next ranked person.
I think it'd be interesting to talk about, I mean, as you run out of money at volunteer state, if you skipped Shelbyville and then did the next three, you'd still be in money. But what are the ramifications of that, and what does that look like to the commission?
I'd like to speak to that. When I went through and read the material in preparation for the meeting, I tried to rank the proposals myself. And I would very happily like to say that 6 of mine are the top 6. Now, 3 of those were my alternates, but nonetheless, they were programs I really was impressed with. So, if you come up with $2.25 million still left on the table with these top programs being funded, I'd say go down to some of these that were less expensive. ETSU, $818,000 to do it seemed to me quite a bit and affect quite a few students. Or the TCAT in Jacksboro, although it's ranked way down low, it's only asking for $85,000. It's just pennies. But I wouldn't leave 2.25 on the table for darn sure. And there are a lot of good proposals here.
I think also, and I'll defer to Scott, the legal answer, Mr. Lee, is one, the commission can absolutely do that. The RFP broadly says that actually the commission has full reign. I think the other side too is if you had to tell that story, I think it's a story I would be very comfortable telling. When it came to that point of the project, there was a $4.9 million request with $2 million on the table. And rather than offer a partial award, we were able to do these other projects. Scott, is that? That's right. Okay.
I don't feel comfortable with a partial award. I just have to say that when I was reading through these and trying to rank them and arrange dollars, a partial award worries me that they won't be able to come back the next year and get the remainder of their funding to finish the job that they started. So I tried to veer away from that.
Mike, once this is approved, does THEC retain any responsibility for oversight for the spending of these funds, or how does that work? Who is responsible to see that it's spent appropriately?
They become a grantee. And with all of the monitoring entailed therein.
Through THEC?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And it will require, obviously, a report. The good news is this harkens back somewhat to what Katie said. So we asked both systems to be involved. If a project's here from the Board of Regents or UT, it's gone through their system office to go through a validation process. But the decision made by the commission today leads to a contract process. And that contract then has all of the parameters that our contracts always entail.
Just to add to that, it would also require State Building Commission approval in certain situations, so there's an extra layer of monitoring or oversight as well.
If people are standing up a new facility, it's going to need to go through Building Commission.
It's not going to flow into their general fund.
No, sir.
Good.
We do require.
Probably end up with 2 categories. One is the program expansion, and one is the new capital. And the new capital not only will become a grant contract, but also become an item for the State Building Commission.
Piggyback on that. Just a quick question, I guess, for Russ or Mike. In addition to sort of the financial responsibilities of, executing the grant, is there any sense of sort of success tracking in terms of connection back to Drive to 55? I mean, I know these are non-recurring dollars, but if the General Assembly were so kind to do this again, I mean, would we have a sense of sort of where we're seeing the biggest impact across these grantees?
ROI. That may be, I think, the single biggest part of the rubric. One was the Drive to 55 tie-in and asking them to answer those questions. Their proposal where they committed to those things now becomes actually part of their contract with us. So I think, one, a great comment for us to make sure that we're inherent in our monitoring process, but they have to explicitly address how they're going to tie in. What you see on that board up there, to be honest, I've read all the proposals. Most of the ones you see ranking high have got an employer at the table saying we needed this. And that was one of, I think, the discriminators, for lack of a better word. There was an industry sector saying we need this project. That's especially true, to be completely honest. If you're 80 and above on here, it's because part of your letters of support were some employer saying, I've got the vacancies, I need you to train people. So that'll give us, I think, a really quantifiable metric to track.
And then kind of just to Pam's point too, I agree, it'd be great not to leave money on the table, but then thinking about objectively how you could determine some of those other small grantees, maybe it is the partner at the table. We probably need to think through, beyond just the dollar fits the amount we have left on the table, how are we thinking about impact and sort of awards?
Did you do a calculation on a cost per student served here? I can't do the math that quickly in my head. Is there?
Right here,
is
column
there,
AE.
There is cost
Dollar
per student served.
Yes, sir.
I got it. Saw it. Thank you.
Even if you remove out Shelbyville from the list, just went in order from high score down the line, how far down could we get if we just simply went in order of the way they're ranked there? How far could we get and fully fund those projects?
We would go through East Tennessee State University, and I'll show you.
You wind up, if you remove the Shelbyville one, you still wind up at about 24.25 million?
Yes, sir. And it actually, we ran a scenario yesterday. It would put just $22,000 over the appropriation, which we can absorb here at THEC with our existing funds. If we went in that order down through ETSU, right, Stephen?
Yeah. You can see there through ETSU, $24.27 million. I want to address a question from earlier. We do require in our RFP, and this was outlined in the timeline for a progress report at the end of December 2017, and then after that, negotiable based on the construction schedule. So that'd be a part that is outlined as well.
So could I throw out, no, please, Mr. Comptroller.
If we don't spend all the money, does it roll forward to the next year?
Well, we'd request carry forward.
So, right.
Yeah.
It doesn't right now.
You'll have a carry forward. You request it, and you'll get it.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we don't have to spend all the money.
So you feel confident that if you leave money there, you will get it back next year?
Well, if we weren't to expend funds, we would immediately, we don't have that authority in the appropriations bill now. We would go through F&A and request the carry forward.
Likely to be great.
I would suggest, unless there's, to use a great Dr. Rhoda phrase, decimal dust left over, other than that, I think I would suggest the commission try to spend it all during the task before you. So
I would echo that. I think not spend it.
Yeah.
But the argument you made.
44 applicants. Does it feel right, Stephen? Let's talk again through Vol State, the 2-sentence blurb on each of those, and kind of gauge the commission's comfort level with those high scores.
I'll do that. TCAT Harriman, $264,000 at the Loudoun County Instructional Service Center. They are equipping an automated lab with simulation mannequins. Mannequin is a brand dummy, MANIKIN. It helps actually simulate the medical rooms to replicate acute and long-term care facilities. Moving on to Motlow State, $5.5 million to add an advanced robotics training center to its McMinnville campus. So we'll enhance the current associate degree program in mechatronics by adding a robotics concentration. So serve 400 degree-seeking students and will be the only type of training center of its kind in the South. Well, to be more specific, the closest training centers like this one are in Detroit, Dayton, and Chicago.
I had written myself a note to ask that question because it's a specific kind of machine that is only manufactured by certain manufacturers. Is that?
Yes, I believe that's correct. Yes.
Okay.
I'm willing to award Stephen extra brownies for knowing the cities that do have it, though. That was remarkable.
He's a good bureaucrat.
Moving from that on to TTU, chickens is what you can think of when you think of TTU. They will be creating in Tennessee the only university poultry center in Tennessee for the Tennessee Center for Poultry Science Excellence. This would be a construction of the building. It's got two purposes. First of all, for the students on campus, they'll be acquiring additional students in human ecology and animal science, and will also tie into the College of Engineering as well. This will also have a commercial kitchen that will increase post-secondary credentials for food service managers. These are not TTU students. These are managers in the area where they can get additional certificates in food preparation, etc. Well, I know we have a lot from TTU here today who might know more about this than I do. I'm sure they do. Moving on to TCAT Knoxville. This is a $5.7 million for a new 30,000 square foot facility in Anderson County. And this will increase capacity for TCAT Knoxville for a couple of reasons. First of all, in Anderson County, they will have a new welding, diesel power, equipment technology, truck driving, and machine tool technology. Because truck driving will move to Anderson County, That will free up about 200 spaces at the TCAT Knoxville campus in Knoxville, which will allow them to better schedule for both daytime and evening classes there. So it will also increase capacity there. So this is a domino effect for TCAT Knoxville. TCAT Pulaski will be acquiring a building. They propose to acquire a building that's right adjacent to their current campus in Pulaski. This is $3.2 million, and they will the new building will be 13,000 square feet. They will also update an existing building on campus for dental assisting, computer technology, and some other programs as well. I expect to increase capacity by 160 full-time enrolled students. Volunteer State. Volunteer State is requesting $1.6 million to build a 6,000 square foot addition on their Wharf Science building. They get into the really strong details here because this is mechatronics. So they're actually going to be constructing an 18-foot ceiling, a really large door so that they can bring in different types of equipment for different industries going forward. This will be facing Nashville Pike, and they see this as being a very strong neighborhood adjustment for Volunteer State to say, hey, look what we have here at Volunteer State, come here and study. A couple things about three of the projects here that I've already been through, TCAT Memphis, TCAT Knoxville, and Volunteer State. And this afternoon, Dr. Deaton and Crystal Collins will be presenting our capital outlay priorities. You'll see that TCAT Memphis has a project that is, I believe, number 10 on the proposal. TCAT Knoxville also has a project that's number 9. Those are different scopes. We were aware of this happening ahead of time, and we knew that coming into this meeting that you would see this in front of you. Volunteer State has a wharf renovation as well. I believe they're number 6 on the capital outlay priorities list. We have talked with Volunteer State and understand that those are different projects. This Volunteer State project is not the same as the one you'll see this afternoon.
Optically, when you first review it, though, you will see redundancy, and we've worked at great lengths to make sure we aren't being redundant. Also, I'd say that some of those TCAT lists right now are probably beyond the scope of realistic capital funding from what you'll see this afternoon. Having done a bit of quick analysis and heard the commission at the July meeting, I think geography should never be a driver, but I will also tell you we might, a great Tristan Denley quote is, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Moving in order after Shelbyville puts us at near perfect Grand Division parity, just for what it's worth. We would have 3 East, 3 West, 4 Middle. Again, should never be a driver. Good factor to be aware of, though.
It also gives us a little more diversity in project classification as well. We add 3 program expansions, which beforehand we just had 1 program expansion.
Back to the optics of 2 capital outlay and this proposal, that was considered in as a part of the rubric even, or it just so happened that that's the way those turned out at the end?
Latter.
Okay.
And in fact, I would have cautioned readers against considering those factors so they weren't swayed. The good news is the breadth of readers from the Department of Labor to UT and TBR, they just weren't aware, which I think was a good thing.
Correct.
Ask a question if I can. I'm sure it's been answered and I've just missed out on that. Let's just take, for example, TCAT Memphis at the top. They've requested $4 million. That's a new capital construction, major renovation project. How do we know it's $4 million?
A lot of that goes into the TBR validation process. Could you explain, Russ?
Sure. Part of the RFP, we asked each project to have a verification letter submitted by the system where they vetted the project cost, not to the extent they would do on a full capital outlay project, mind you, but given in a read, looking over the details, getting a sense of whether the scope they propose is consistent with the amount of money being requested, and each project was required to have one.
I guess I just want to be sure it's an accurate number. And I know you're not going to be down to the penny, but at the same time, I always have a concern we give TCAT Memphis, not to pick on them, $4 million, and it comes back and it was actually $3.5 million. That's $500,000 we could have done something with somewhere else. Or it comes back at $4.5 million, and lo and behold, they turn it back around and say, well, gosh, now we need $500,000 and state, they come back and ask for appropriation of the legislature. They come back and try, and especially with TCAT, so where there's not a a plant pot out there to be able to draw money from, really. So should I be concerned about that? Should I not?
Treasurer?
I agree with the Secretary's concerns because I think, as members of the Building Commission, what we have found is that you're always at variance with estimates until you get an actual bid. That's what, and we end up revising projects many, many times because of that, regardless of how much estimating you may or verification you may do before. So you just need a procedure to deal with that if the bids come in at an impossible number or if it comes in less than the money. So,
but I also like to avoid is if it comes in less, and this is a problem throughout state government, frankly. If it comes in less, that shouldn't be carte blanche and say, oh, while we're here, we got another $300,000 to put into this project. I like to think that money can come back here to be able to take care of another project later on. At the same time, I'm also aware that if that came in at 3.7, they had $300,000 left, they know they've got to revert to 300,000. They're going to figure out a way to make it $4 million. They'll figure out a way to make that, to utilize that money somehow. And there may be a good utilization for it, there may not be. I just want this body to have some control over how that money is spent and not at the end of it say, well, lucky us, we spent $4 million on the nose.
Well, one, really, and so what I think that does is helps us frame what happens next. So this afternoon, when people start getting good news, if they've had an issue identified in the DB70, I can assure you, Mr. Secretary, the conversation starts there to say, congratulations, but your DB70, as evaluated by TBR Capital staff, you need to address those concerns with us, and that's part of building the contract. And I can assure you, if we felt like that contract, we won't put them in a posture where they're coming before the Building Commission with a project that's not going to be ready. Also, that gets to the alternates point that was made. And if during that contract process somebody is not able to reconcile that DB70, we'd take that into account. And we would come back before the Commission with an interim action recommendation.
So that answers the question I really had. The point of my question was ongoing supervision. In some sense, this is conditional approval on hitting the marks going forward. Otherwise, other action would be come back to THEC.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And our contract process is iterative. Okay. The first thing that happens is every one of these potential grantees is going to have to send us a new budget, which is their contract budget. That allows us to then sit down with the TBR recommendation and say, okay, we think you need to address these issues. The second thing is their scope of work for their contract, which becomes a binding legal plan, correct, Scott? That builds the conversation. But I'll also assure you, given the visibility that's on this and kind of the fact that this is the first time, it is something we will monitor closely. And I also think you've seen Stephen Gentile may well know every line of these 44 proposals. We're close. We're going to maintain that level of visibility with these grantees.
And Mike, I assume that they receive the award in lump sum up front, or do we dole it out in installments?
Our payment methodology is absolutely installment-based, conditional upon receiving reports.
Okay.
Yeah. The good news is also, if you're going to do a new facility, you don't write a builder a check for $5 million. It comes in phases. That allows us to evaluate, are you in compliance? But typically, what is the methodology, Scott, in most of the contracts?
There'll be benchmarks as it goes through the process. We receive formal reports.
When it comes time to make a motion, do we need to include any language like that in the motion, or is it?
I think we can handle that on the contract process. At this point, it would really be just the commission's ratification of the recommendations and those decisions being made today. Who will receive?
Hearing none, we'll obviously entertain a motion.
Yes. I can't speak fully for them. I might ask Chancellor Gregory to help me out. I'll say Motlow's partnership with Bridgestone Siri is unprecedented and nationally recognized. and it's specifically mechatronics based. It makes me think they have a set of capabilities that you've definitely zeroed in on. It's atypical for a community college to have that depth. My sense is that they do, though. Chancellor?
I'll just say this. So this is actually for the McMinnville campus, branch campus of Motlow, and it's in furtherance of their mechatronics program that they also have at the Smyrna campus, at the Moore County campus, and also in Fayetteville. So it's there's a relationship that exists with MTSU also, so these graduates can go on further. But these programs are staying full, and there seems to be a continued appetite for these programs in that area.
And then the two kind of quality indicators there that I think are important are the scores were almost at an 8-point kind of agreement on the quality of the project. That speaks to me on the Motlow.
I'll make a motion, and I'm going to ask Scott to monitor what I say to make sure that it's clear so we don't make a mistake. I will move that we fund the projects in the order that they are listed on this spreadsheet until every project is fully funded, and remove TCAP Shelbyville from that list. Is that sufficiently clear, or do I need to restate that?
Yes, sir, that's sufficiently clear.
Okay.
I'll second that.
So that would lead us exhausting funds at, Stephen, delete Shelbyville's funding so we can see the formula fill in 24.2 at ETSU.
Very good. We have a motion and we have a second, so we'll have a roll call, please, ma'am.
I assume, I assume that's conditioned on execution of an appropriate agreement containing such provisions as the executive director and the staff deem appropriate, right?
I will amend my motion to include that language, if we can do that. If Mr. Wilson will amend your second.
So amended.
Okay, so the motion as amended is before the commission. We'll call the roll, please, ma'am.
Pope.
Aye.
Dr. Dishner. Ms. Coben. Aye. Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard.
Aye.
Ms. Roach. Aye. Mayor Wharton.
Aye.
Comptroller Wilson. Mr. Keith Wilson.
Aye.
We have 11 ayes, motion carried.
Very good.
Could I just ask, how far does that take us down this list when we run out of money? Where are we going without Shelbyville?
ETSU.
Oh, I'm not turning.
No, absolutely. We got to, I think, discuss what happens next sufficiently, but the treasurer's point's well made. All of this is subject to, one, a legal instrument approved by CPO. And if for some reason during that process we feel as if a project can't comply or move forward, we will come back to you with an interim action recommendation. We will commit to that here. So what happens next? Notifications would go out this afternoon for both those awarded and those that do not. I have heard that our viewership online may be at a record high of 15 today with people that are watching. And what I thank the commission for is I thank you very much for respecting the process, because I can assure you the next few days will be interesting. Those that aren't funded will want to talk to us, and we will talk to them. And we will be able to share their rubric and their score. And the process the commission followed, it helps us greatly to be able to say this was the cut. So thank you for that.
All right. Lunchtime. Do we want to work through lunch, or do we want to?
Will the commission. But we're going to work through lunch.
So everybody just grab your lunch and come back to the table, and when everybody's back, we'll press on.
Always a good plan.
For Crystal Collins. I think Crystal, thank you. Actually,
I think Dr. Deaton's going to open.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Well, if I could turn everyone's attention to this is item 4 in your notebooks, and Mr. Chairman and Mr. Krause, with your indulgence, we'll probably go through the presentation in the sequence that the agenda has them, but also pause at the right time to, of course, take votes. And obviously, we can answer questions as we go. I'm going to stay here and Crystal will be at the podium. We will go back and forth a little bit and tag team parts of this. Even though these are separate items, these are functionally all part of a larger recommendation package that really tries to have the different elements speak to each other. And the way we think about tuition is informed by how we think about the operating recommendations, which informs how we think about financial aid, et cetera. So these are unique elements. They are all linked together. As we go through, I'm going to give some overview slides on the operating parts to kind of set the stage. And then we're going to get into the tuition at that point and then capital outlay. But to set the stage for you first, I want to show you a chart, and this is both in front of you in hard copy, color slides, as well as on the screen. I want to flip to the first slide, please, Crystal. Which is one of the ones that if you've been with us for a while, you may have noticed this slide before. And let me unpack what's going on this slide. This is a longitudinal history, of course, of all total E&G revenues at our universities, and that's really from two primary sources, state funding levels and tuition fee revenue. This is both inflation adjusted, and it's adjusted for FTE, for the enrollment levels. And it shows you both the grand total and how it fluctuates over time, as well as how the two main component parts change over time as well. State funding per student in the blue bar, and student fee revenue from all sources in the red bar. This is very similar to analyses that other states do. SHIO does this. Many organizations do this. And our trends are not that different from what you see across the state. Several things jump out at this, of course. First is that the blue bars really represent what is a longer-term divestment from state government into higher education. And this is in part because other priorities have risen in funding priority, and other things have become more relevant to fund and more urgent to fund. In higher ed, having another revenue source over time, that per student funding level has gone down in real dollars. And that has largely been filled, though, with tuition, with the red bar. Over time, our tuition fees have gone from, and this will get into more of the later parts of the presentation, us being a low fee state to us being more of a moderate fee state. But the sum total of those two bars, and this represents really the second key observation, the sum total of those two bars is not dramatically different over time. It tends to fluctuate in a total revenue sense between about $14,000 to $16,000. You do not see market changes over time. You see fluctuations, of course, but generally the long-term patterns hold. The recent uptick that you see from about really the immediate aftermath of the Great Recession to now is largely due to declining FTE at universities as opposed to just real revenue growth. But again, this trend has tended to fluctuate and gone through those undulations over time, and we expect this pattern to hold. The staff is very cognizant of this when we bring to you the recommendations both for the operating increase and the tuition increase as well. Those things play together.
That's one thing I want us, as we're thinking through these components, as the fiscal staff work on this, we always try to make sure each component is complementary of the other. Obviously, tuition and this depiction of the burden that's split between students and institutions is one that feeds into the formula. But I commend our staff that they're not thinking in a vacuum for each of these three pieces. I do think, and Dennis and I had a conversation earlier today, there is capacity for us to maybe go deeper into that to make sure that, and Dennis, I'll ask you, we always catch Dennis in the middle of eating, by the way. Watching the video from last summer's meeting, I think we called him mid-brownie. There is capacity for us to also begin to think about this and how it relates to our financial aid and how those two tools work together. Dennis, can you just...
As I looked at the package of things that as I looked at the package of things that you put together, a couple of observations. One, it's framed still fairly much in what I would say an institutional-centric view of higher education finance. Okay, that the explicit parts of the trade-offs are kind of between state. It's this picture, and the attempt to make sure that the institutions are in fact funded in order to fulfill their missions. I mean, that's the most obvious piece on the table. The bigger question but how does one come full circle and make the funding pattern and the funding picture a question of, is the master plan protected in the funding mechanism. And the question is, most centrally, how do you pay for Drive to 55? The question of how do you use all sources of funds to ensure that not only the institutions have enough capacity to serve the number of students that have to be served in order to do this, but the bigger question is, how do you ensure affordability for those students that have to come into the system who will almost uniformly be low-income students? How do you assure affordability for all of them? And the whole question of, because it kind of popped into my head when I see, the recommendation on tuition will more than eat up the amount of money recommended for increase in need-based student financial aid. And so, someplace those two things have to be more explicitly recognized in the backgrounds to the calculation. So you've got some of the pieces connected, but not all of them, is what I'm saying.
That's right, and this sort of foreshadows discussions that we'll have over the course of the next couple of years on the long-range financial plan that the Focus Act requires this body to adopt. Part of the thinking in that plan is wrestling with exactly that question, which we've long wrestled with. Every state wrestles with this. It's really a difficult one to balance an institutional funding need and affordability on the student side. But that's exactly the kind of underlying question that'll undergird the long-range financial plan.
And just a final comment. One of the things that will do, I will assure you, is it will mean that different kinds of institutions are going to have to get treated more differently in the scheme of things than they historically have been. The tuition policy at UTK is going to have to be treated quite differently than the tuition policy for the TCATs. Okay, and the same level of 2% or 4% or whatever is in your recommendation may likely have to be very different. Not just for the universities, but Knoxville is going to have to be quite different from Martin and et cetera. So enough said.
See, you'd also want to look at your outcome-based formula and whether the master plan requires you to look at outcomes a little differently and how you fund those. For instance, cost efficiencies and things of that nature per program might become a factor in your outcome formula funding.
Just as an aside, and it's a great comment, Mr. Wilson, because the formula really provides a venue to have that conversation when a lot of other funding policy historically in Tennessee and elsewhere has not even allowed that conversation to play out in finance policy. And that's exactly the kind of question that really should seep through those conversations. The next slide is looking at the same data, but rather than looking at total revenue per student, it's total revenue per award at our universities, looking at the sum total of degrees produced at the undergraduate level over time. The story here, of course, the shifting in funding is the same, but the grand total funding per award has been trending downward ever so slightly over time, indicating to us at least that there's a greater and greater level of efficiency to produce the same unit of output across our public universities over time. We have similar data for the community colleges. It's a little trickier on this chart because of the short-term certificate award issue, but for the most part, the same trends hold at the two-year sector. Finally, last couple of slides, just to kind of, again, set the stage before Crystal gets into the details. What you're looking at here is the last 15 years or so of what the annual, and this is not cumulative, the annual change in the two main revenue sources has been. The annual change in appropriations and that year's annual average change in university tuition. So, for example, on the far right-hand side of that slide, in 2016-17, overall appropriations at our universities grew almost 7%. Average tuition and fees clocked in at 3.3%. A couple things stand out. First is that the tuition reaction to state funding has moderated over time. You don't quite see the bouncing that occurred in the early part of the aughts, which we were experiencing. You also don't see, and UT and TBR are still to be commended to this day for not putting the bulk of the reductions that occurred during the Great Recession on the backs of students. These, by the way, do not represent cuts in the way that sort of the federal government defines a cut, which is a reduction in the rate of growth. These are actual dollar cuts that occurred year over year, both at the universities and then the next slide, two-year schools, same general theme is there. So to kind of wrap up this first section before Crystal gets into the details, again, what you're going to be seeing across the formula is very much both in a calculation sense and a philosophical sense linked to the next item, which is the tuition. This is now the 7th year of use of the outcomes formula, and as Director Krause earlier alluded to, it is still sort of remarkable even to us that this has taken root, and it really drives not just actual programmatic responses from schools, but it seems to affect also the philosophy, the approach they take to how they think about investments and how they think about the way they organize their campuses and spend their money. The governor remarked at our budget hearing about the use of the formula and how it has helped many of the reforms take root in Tennessee. So it's a key element to that. If there are further questions, I can take them now.
I have a couple of questions to make sure I understand this. When we talk about tuition or fees from students, that includes the money that they receive from scholarships. It includes those that are funded by Pell Grants as well as state-funded scholarships. It's
everybody.
It includes all that.
Yes, sir. It's everybody.
And these do not show the revenue that the university may have from its endowment or from gifts.
Correct. Yeah, it does not include those restricted revenues.
Doesn't include those.
Yeah, and those tend to be smaller, except for in UT Knoxville's case.
They may non-existent.
Exactly.
Non-existent. So we have those to consider. And if you look at it from the viewpoint of the state as differently from the university, then you may want to consider also state-funded scholarships. And if you look at the tuitions, you may want to consider the Pell Grants. That'd be the primary federal money. So we need to keep, okay. I want to make sure I understood that all.
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
First of all, I appreciate the fact that when you're making the recommendations, you are looking at aid and tuition and state appropriation. I think that is the right way to holistically. As it relates to state aid, and particularly the TSAA program, for the dollars expended, how much of that is public sector versus non-public sector? Any just rough idea?
Sure. There's around $80 million ballpark.
80 total?
80 current total. About 40% of that, in a dollar sense, goes to students at the private school sector, who represent about 20% of the students because their average award amount is larger. So it's about 40% of the money, 20% of the students.
Balance to the public institutions.
Yes. Yes. There's a small sliver that goes to students at proprietary schools. That's been a long-standing state policy choice the state has made.
Feels right. Is there a place where we want to talk about the commission recommendation on TSA this year? Or Chris, do you get
it's going to be in this section.
Great. Section, exactly. Yeah.
Because they really travel together.
They really do.
Okay. Hello. Good afternoon. Dr. Deaton talked so long everyone has stopped eating, which means that you're actually going to be able to ask me questions. So now I'm truly concerned about how the next 30 minutes are going to go. But I'd like to say first, thank you, Dr. Deaton, Director Krause, Chairman Cope, members of the commission. What you're about to see, the next 3 agenda items, 4, 5, and 6, plus what you just saw, agenda item 3, accounts for about the last 8 months of work for me and these 2 gentlemen over here. So thank you so much for your attention and for your input. So at any time, if you have any questions, concerns, please don't hesitate to interrupt me, and either I or Dr. Deaton will try and answer your question as closely as possible. So beginning first with our state appropriation recommendation this year. Again, this funding, $48 million to fund our outcomes formula units and our TCATs are based, the formula unit section is based on the outcomes-based funding formula. The TCAT recommendation is based on a TCAT formula that we run. This $48 million accounts for about a 5.2% increase over the 16-17 funding level that we received from the state. And this is coupled with a tuition guidance recommendation. Again, we're going to get further into the discussion about the difference between guidance and binding tuition recommendations. But this $48 million is coupled with a guidance recommendation of 0 to 4% across all sectors. So community colleges, TCATs, and the university systems. What we believe this will allow us to do, this $48 million and the 0 to 4%, will allow us to continue to increase affordability for our students in Tennessee. We've been very lucky over the last 2 years to receive funding from the state, requested, and as with last year in 16-17, more than we requested for our outcomes-based funding formula, as well as from the institutions working diligently to keep the tuition increases at their institutions low within the range that we provided, and as we'll see later, some of the lowest that we've seen in 30 or 40 years. So both the state and institutions should be commended on this progress in increasing affordability for our students. $18.1 million for the TSAA Financial Aid Award. Whoever stole my thunder on TSAA, I think that was Chancellor Gregory. What this $18.1 million will do, first of all, this is related to THEC's summer meeting. They had their summer board meeting in, I believe it was June. Oh, yeah. And at that time, they recommended that we ask for additional funds for TSAA of $18.1 million. Currently, TSAA funds about 48,000 students, 48,600 students. What this additional $18.1 million will do will allow us to fund 10,000 more students, which is about 15% of the 76,000 students who are eligible right now, but we just simply run out of money before we can provide an award to them. Of particular interest with TSAA, this is our main financial aid program for any adults in Tennessee. Most of our adults who return to college qualify for Pell and so are considered low income. And most of our other financial aid programs are directed at our traditional age students, and so adults do not qualify. Additionally, we're requesting $20 million for non-formula units. This is something different that we began last year. This $20 million is split into two pieces. So F&A specifically said to us, hey, we'd really like for you to query your institutions, your non-formula units, and ask for some more strategic interventions on those campuses rather than just asking for a blanket base plus increase for their operating costs. And so this is the second year where we've gone to those institutions, to the systems, asked for assistance in identifying strategic initiatives at either the system or campus level, so that money can be more closely directed towards institutions. So of this $20 million, 9.7 of it is about a 2.7% increase in operating, which again, we think is a good representation of some of the operating increases we should see in the coming year. That's based on the Higher Education Price Index faculty salary estimate increase for 17-18. Additionally, $10.3 million for strategic initiatives, 1 project at TBR and 2 at the UT system.
Hey, Crystal, if we could for a minute, I want to talk a little bit about the TBR project because I think it's critical importance, and then I'll defer to the Chancellor. TBR began a process last year to assess the safety and security of our students, which I don't know that there's any higher responsibility. They brought, I thought, together an incredible group. We had police officers involved. We had student affairs people involved, asking the central question, how do we make our campuses as safe as possible? They brought a recommendation together that I think funds both infrastructure, and we're talking like putting locks on classrooms that make them safer in the event of a situation on campus, but also personnel and law enforcement personnel on many of our community college campuses that don't have those. And so it was the strategic initiative we highlighted with the governor last week. I think it gets out the door at $8 million odd, 6 recurring, 2 non-recurring. It feels like just the right thing to do, and are just very appreciative of the process you all laid out to get here, that of all the votes we cast to be able to say we are recommending something that's going to make students safer, feels like the right thing to do.
Thank you, Mike. And should the members of the commission decide to take this recommendation and go forward, I would appreciate it. I really want to say a word of appreciation to Bruce Harbour, who's our Chief of Police at the University of Memphis, and Dr. Rebecca Ashford, who is our Vice President of Student Affairs at Mississippi State, and Dr. Lynn Goodman, who's in our TCAT sector. They really did a fantastic job over a 6-month period of time doing sort of this environmental landscape of safety and security across our system. And as Mike has suggested, I think came back with a very on-point report that would allow us to provide an additional level of safety and protection for our students and our faculty and staff. And it does relate to hardware improvements. It relates to some personnel improvements. It also relates to creation of behavior intervention teams across our system so that we have, again, early alert systems on students who may be in danger of either harming themselves or someone else. So thank you, Mike, for the work, and I'm grateful for the others who really kind of spent the last 6 months. They took time in going to Virginia Tech and meeting with folks who had the tragedy there and lessons learned from there, and those are sort of encompassed into this overall task force that then poured out into the recommendation.
And though we have an impending kind of divergence with the locally governed institutions under focus, this funding recommendation would cover the hardware for the universities.
Yes.
And just as a wrap up on strategic initiatives, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the two for UT that we're also recommending. $400,000 for Ag Launch, which is basically an intervention strategy to try and bring farms and the way that they are providing food and other agricultural needs into business and having them work more closely together, as well as $1 million for an increase in the governor's chairs program. And for further information about all three of those, although it's much less information than what Chancellor Gregory just gave on the TBR portion, all of that information is on page 9 in attachment 4. Lastly, on this is one of the things that I'm proudest about working at THEC is we often are a leader in intervention strategies for students. You'll remember the work that we've done with SAILS. The work that we've done with Tennessee Promise. We're doing things that then the federal government tries to do because we've done it and it's worked for our students. And this year, I think, is another opportunity for that. We are recommending a small, non-recurring appropriation of $1 million for what we're calling student retention grants. And what these are small awards to students who have emergency situations. So a lot of our students, something will happen, their car breaks down, they get a medical bill that they have to spend their tuition dollars on, something will happen in their life that will require them to stop out or drop out. And those are not students often who will come back and complete. What this $1 million will allow us to do is provide about 2,000 awards to students across Tennessee, averaging at about $500 each. Institutions will be able to apply to participate. Any of our public institutions will be allowed to apply to participate in this program. And currently, I mean, to point out some of our institutions, 6 of our community colleges are already doing this, and 7 of our 9 universities are providing emergency loan programs to students. So what we're hoping that this student retention grant will do will supplement some of those activities, say our larger universities, as well as supplant some of those services maybe at our community colleges so they can free up that money to do other interventions for students. So these student retention grants, I think, is along the long tradition of THEC stepping up for our students and doing something that could potentially be life-changing and move us closer to the Drive to 55. And that's about as flowery as I'm going to get about finances today. So looking specifically at that $48 million for our formula units and our TCATs, this breaks down to about 43.8. It's $43.752 million for our outcomes formula units, and again, based on the outcomes-based funding formula and performance on those outcomes within the outcomes-based funding formula. With this recommendation of $43.8 million, these are the largest state appropriation increases by sector. And I'm preparing you all for the focus generation, right? Because I'm showing you what will be our locally governing board, local governed institutions, their highest performer this year as well. So our highest performing community college this year is Nashville State Community College. They're going to experience a 10% increase in appropriations. And Nashville State is a good news story. They saw year-to-year increases in every outcome in the funding formula this year, every single one. The largest occurred in their less than 1 year certificates, their transfers out, and their workforce training, which shows a broad involvement not only with their students but with their local industry. Many of the additional certificates that they are producing are hitting either the 1, 2, or 3 focus populations. You'll recall in the funding formula for our community colleges, we have 3 populations of focus. Those who qualify for the Pell, who are considered low income, adult students, and then students who are academically underprepared. And so many of these certificates are being awarded to a student who qualifies for all 3 of those. So they're doing very good work with their populations. University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, for the 2nd year in a row, is the highest performing university, not just at UT, but overall. UTC has seen year-to-year increases in the 90 credit hour benchmark, as well as increases in bachelor's and associate degrees awarded and degrees per 100 FTE. And what this says to us is that they're being more efficient with the students they have. There was concern over enrollment declines due to promise, and what institutions are, UTC is a perfect example. They're being more efficient with their students and producing more degrees. I think Dr. High has a question.
I just want to add one thing. Several years ago, they focused on bottleneck courses, and they have eliminated the bottleneck courses, and so the solution is now open and the students can get through.
Which illustrates, I think our challenge here is to make this formula come to life because it's a funding formula, so sometimes that can be really in the weeds. But when institutions do well in the formula, it's because they've identified something like that. Or Austin Peay said, let's have a one-stop advising center. And so the formula really plays out as a student affairs function. And the institutions that are doing well have doubled down on something that's worked for students. It's the right thing to do. And UTC especially, I think, had a little bit of concern around Tennessee Promise. And so as a result, they've retained the students they have and 6.8% increase.
Dr. High, could you explain a bottleneck course?
A bottleneck course is one that most students have to take, might be a gen ed course, but typically we weren't as intentional about making sure that it was always offered every semester so that the student could get it in time to progress.
Or enough sections?
Enough sections,
okay.
yeah.
Understood.
Thank you, Dr. High. Lastly, Austin Peay State University, this should not be a surprise to anyone who's been coming to our meetings. They've been excelling in the outcomes-based funding formula since its inception in 11-12, and they're continuing to do very well now. The 6.6% increase, Austin Peay saw year-over-year increases in all but 2 of their outcomes. So this is broad across the institution, not in specific outcomes, but across all outcomes at Austin Peay. We don't talk very often about the funding formula for the TCATs, and I'm not going to talk a lot about it today either, other than to say this is a good news story for our TCATs. Our TCATs, just like our community colleges, have stepped up to accept Tennessee Promise students. They're growing exponentially. As you saw with the D55 Capacity Fund grant, we're building 2 new TCATs that are sorely needed in those areas. This $4.2 million increase for the TCATs represents a 7% increase over their 16-17 funding level and is the highest increase in the last 7 years. And that is specifically because of successes with their FTEs. We know that a student at a TCAT completes a diploma certificate 85% of the time. So their enrollment is pretty much closely aligned with completions. And so they have taken their enrollment increases, their increases in the 3-year average, as well as year-over-year increases in FTE. And that is what the formula monetizes for them. And they've seen an increase of 14% year to year in actual FTE enrollment across the entire TCAT system. So, it's a good news story for our TCATs. So if you want to see how your institution did, all of that information can be found on page 6 of agenda item 4. And at this point, I'm going to move into some specific institution analyses. And so one of the things that we always try and look at when we do the outcomes-based funding formula is we do something that's called a component parts analysis. We're in the very early stages of this. I've only done it for 2 institutions so far, the 2 institutions you're going to see today. And basically what this allows us to do is we identify what their changes in outcomes have, how money has flowed based on that. So today, the community college we're going to look at is Motlow State Community College. Now, it wasn't the top performer, that was Nashville State, but it was the 3rd highest performer with a 9.1% increase. And I'm sure you've heard this from Emily House when talking about Tennessee Promise. Motlow experienced a 75% increase in full-time freshman enrollment in 2015 because of Promise and the number of students that are attending that institution. What that is, and you can see the results here in this parts analysis, they are going to get $156,000 for those first 2 series of benchmarks. And that's what a full-time Tennessee Promise student should be doing in the first year, is ticking off those 12 hours and 24-hour benchmarks. Additionally, $200,000 for new associate degrees. Now, granted, those are probably not Promise students because they've only been enrolled there for a year. But what they are doing is keeping the students that they did have and getting them to completion. Additionally, our transfer out increases 56%. Those are students who may be Promise students who have spent their year, and then moved on to a university. And so the good news story here is those two early progression metrics, which is our earliest indications of Promise success, the 12 and 24-hour benchmarks, year-to-year increases of 34% and 28%. So this is the first year that we're seeing results of Promise flow through the formula. So a 34% increase in the number of students who are meeting the 12-hour benchmark, and year-to-year means in a 3-year average as we move on, we're going to see exponential growth at our campuses who have success with these students. Looking at UTC, again, this is a great example of our universities and how they're responding to the funding formula. What we're finding at UTC is an increase of nearly half of their increase, so a $3.1 million increase in funds for them, nearly half of their increase can be attributed to success in their bachelor's and associate degrees and their graduation rate. And I think that this is important because this is an indication of not only completion, but completion on time, which is something that is imperative for the Drive to 55, that these campuses are not only producing degree recipients, but we're producing it in a timely fashion so that we can meet the needs of the state. I'd also like to point out that through the formula review process, UTC identified bachelor's and associate degrees and 6-year graduation rate as their 2 highest priorities. UTC, based just strictly on Carnegie classification, probably we would not have necessarily put 15% on graduation rate, because for their Carnegie class and who they're serving, in the previous model, we may have thought that that should have been a lower value, but they had belief and they are performing. And I think that should be commended. So looking specifically at community college outcome changes, what these are year-to-year changes. So the actual outcomes produced in 14-15 versus the outcomes produced in 15-16. And of particular interest here, again, the effects of Tennessee Promise. I would point out the 12 and 24-hour benchmarks, an 8.7% increase in 24-hour benchmarks across the system. That's wonderful news. That is a good indication of what we're going to see as those students progress and complete their associate degrees on campus. Additionally, I want to talk for a second about the associate degrees. Dr. High mentioned this earlier during her remarks for the UT system. The reverse transfer, which we refer to in the formula as reverse articulation, and that's just us being contrarian, but the reverse transfer process, this idea of a partnership between community colleges and universities to award an associate degree to a student who has transferred to a university from a community college before completing an associate degree. So working in partnership to audit their transcripts, identify which classes they need to take in order to qualify for an associate's degree, and then award those through the community college together as 2 institutions. What we discovered this year is, and you'll see that associates line, 711 additional. We actually had a slight drop off in associate degrees awarded at community colleges without the reverse articulation process. The good news is, though, that probably if we hadn't have done the reverse articulation process, those degrees would have never been awarded to those students. But because of those partnerships, we awarded 905 associate degrees to students who transferred to universities. So if for some reason, life or something else, that student is unable to complete their bachelor's degree, they have an associate's degree that provides them skills and an entryway into some job markets, and they're not a non-completer, they actually have an associate's degree. So that's a good news story. And then lastly, I'll point out the dual enrollment hours here. Dual enrollment has just been exploding over the last couple of years. And again, that's a partnership in the other direction between K-12 and our community colleges. And last year we saw an 8% increase in dual enrollment. This year, a 4.5% increase, which is pretty impressive that we still are able to offer and find more high school students to participate in these programs. And we believe that probably one of the factors this year is some hard work that was done between TBR, THEC, and other, I think probably the legislature as well, because we changed the dual enrollment grant so that students can now get 2 free courses rather than having $1,200 spread out over 4 classes. They now get their first 2 for free and then have that additional $200 to try and mitigate some cost on a third. And that was a partnership where TBR said we're not going to charge more than this, and every student is entitled to 2. And so we're seeing that play out on our campuses. And then community colleges who participate in this receive funds for offering those courses to students. Looking at our universities, the results are a little more mixed for our universities. It's not as positive as a story. You'll see some declines and some increases. But what I will say is the bachelor's and associate degree increase. That's not just reverse articulated degrees, which again, of the 905 awarded at our community colleges, about 772 of them were in partnership with our public institutions. The remaining were private schools that are participating in the process through partnerships with our community colleges. And so producing about 772 additional associate degrees, but also 740 additional bachelor's degrees within our university sector.
So it feels like a good formula takeaway. Our degree production is up.
Yes.
And that's dramatic and important. There's a drop you're going to see there in our master's degrees, which Dr. Hayburn will be able to talk about intimately, because we think it has a lot to do with LEAs no longer providing incentive funding to teachers who have master's degrees. We think that is the core of that effect, Crystal.
Yes, the education specialist degrees. And not to put too fine a point on it, but I think our canary in the coal mine on this was TTU a couple years ago. We knew it was coming to the other institutions, and it is now, the wave has come through to our other institutions who are offering these degrees. Okay, the last of the scary tables, I promise. So this is looking at our share of outcomes. So what our outcomes-based funding formula does is it takes your performance on outcomes and then it calculates your share of total. So what share of any available funding that we have, either the $48 million that we are recommending today or any amount that the state is able to offer us, what share does your institution receive? Of particular interest here, I mean, we all know Austin P has performed really well over the 7 years of the formula. You can see an increase in share from 3.84 to 4.71. An increase at Chattanooga, again, 4.9 to 5.36. These are high-performing universities. There was always some concern, and there always seems to be whenever we have conversations around the funding formula, of movement of money between sectors, and this concern that it's built for one sector and not the other. I think one of the good things in having different outcomes and allowing institutions to succeed at what they are supposed to do means that we aren't seeing large swings in funds between our universities and our community colleges. So the community college proportion or share of total was 27.2 when we began, and it's right at 26.9 right now. So not a large swing from our community colleges to our universities or vice versa. Any questions? I have lulled you into this is great. Okay, so for those of you who have been attending our meetings for a while, this chart should look very familiar to you. I don't know what we're going to do when we're at 10 years because it won't fit on the screen. We'll have to buy a larger projector, I guess. But this is the first 7 years of the funding formula and how cumulative change in funding has occurred at our community colleges due strictly to the formula. We used to have a hold harmless policy in the very beginning. That is not included here. So just movements in funding in the community colleges based on performance in the model. And what I want to point out here, just briefly, that thick black line in the middle, that's our overall total funding level. So what that represents is money as we've received it from the state. And you'll notice in the first year, we actually took a reduction, then we had a flat year, and then we've seen increases in 4 of the last 5. Of particular interest here, I know there's a lot of lines. We have 13 community colleges, but if I can draw your attention to Northeast State, and so that is the green line with really, oh, thanks, Russ, really like no indication of, it doesn't have a triangle or a square, but as recently as 2014, Northeast State trailed 11 of its peers. And had a cumulative appropriation level of -7%. So one could say they were not performing great in the performance funding model. Since then, they have increased their outcomes, almost every outcome every single year. And due to that performance, they're now the 3rd highest funded community college across the sector, trailing only Chattanooga State, our perennial leader, and then Pellissippi State, our new leader in the system. This is mostly due to increases in the 3-year average for dual enrollment, associate degrees, long-term certificates, and job placement, which again shows a breadth of intervention with students, producing students who are maybe transferring on to universities, as well as with the job placement metric, students who are graduating and then going directly into the job market. So we think this is a good news story. This is the question we hate to get. Here's what I'll say about Southwest. Southwest has a new president, and they recognize that they're struggling, and they're doing everything they can to no longer struggle. And we're doing the same thing. I don't know if you remember last year, we recommended $800,000 for the Institutional Outcome Improvement Fund grant. That was meant to provide competitively awarded grants to institutions for intervention strategies related to failing outcomes. We were only able to award 6 grants. Southwest was the number 8 proposal. With the approval of the recommendation today, we will be recommending a second round of IOIF grants. We will ask for institutions who have not already received one, and I might be talking off script at this point. I'm making it up as I go. No, we will ask institutions to apply again for that competitive grant program, and I think Southwest, they had a great proposal. We just ran out of money.
I think that this year we're going to give the money to the people that need it the most, to be honest. That's not hashed out fully, but if your outcomes are low, you need to get the funds. I'm glad the Southwest question came up because it's I think, alarming when you see it. Mayor Wharton, I won't put you on the spot. I'll say this institution has faced systemic challenges for a long time. Part of what we are doing at THEC, which I'm proud of, is we're not just telling people what their formula performance is anymore. Russ and his team have sat down with a set of consultants around Southwest 3 or 4 times now to say, Dr. Hall, the new president, who I will tell you, she is trying. Dr. Hall, these are the outcomes you are lagging in that, like Northeast, you could turn around in a matter of years. But I had hoped we would talk about Southwest because you can't talk about the formula without talking about the fact that we have an institution that is incredibly challenged.
She is, I have attended a couple of her community meetings, priorities, and she's hitting it head on. She's focusing the mission. They have tried to teach everything to everybody. Focusing on quantity as opposed to quality. She's going to make some big staff changes down there. I went out and visited with her when she first got there. I said, the best time to do it is when you first get here. You don't know who your friends or your enemies are. Just go out. If you got to get rid of somebody, do it before they invite you over to dinner.
They tweet that out real quick.
And she's doing precisely that. But it's much bigger than the college itself. It's Southwest is I guess a microcosmic slice of the community as a whole down there. Frankly, some of the students never gotten there. They're there, and she's got to deal with them.
A really good, encouraging early indicator, though, their Tennessee Promise retention, right in the middle of the pack, if not a little bit higher. So that's encouraging. But again, I really commend the fiscal team for not just telling Southwest this is what your data is, but really trying to have an intervention, for lack of a better word. Mr. Secretary, did you have?
Well, I was going to say, Pam asked, and I would like to see the chart. We have, I guess, one of our slides here, the breakdown component parts of Motlow State.
Yes, sir.
On slide 11. I don't expect you had that today, obviously, but can I get one of those for what Southwest looks like and kind of see the challenge
Absolutely.
there?
And I will say, I have it for 16-17, so current year, what moved money. We always do a preliminary based on our recommendation and then a final based on what we get out of the legislature. But yeah, I'll do Southwest next for you, sir, so I can send that to you.
Thank you.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
I come in. Maybe it's helpful or maybe it's not. When we set up community colleges, and we didn't set them up in urban areas, we set up technical institutes in urban areas, except in Memphis, and we had Shelby State Community College and Southwest Technical Institute. 2000, we merged those two institutions together to create Southwest Tennessee Community College. One of the things Chancellor Morgan did before he left was noting the poor performance. He hired a consulting group who went in. It was close to simultaneous with the search with Dr. Essex retirement and the search for the new president. Dr. Hall, I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Warden, has come on, and I do think has the right stuff. She's taken the Huron report and is using it as a blueprint to help to restructure the college. And so there are significant changes that are going on at the college. The challenge is large. I think we have a president who has the grit and the vision to try to make some of the difficult changes. Macon Cove site out on the interstate seems to be doing well. Union Avenue struggles. We do well in Collierville and Maxine Smith. Our other remote sites in Whitehaven and Gill campus, we struggle at those spots. So there's not one complete answer to this, but we sort of have a blueprint to follow that is pretty fresh that she is engaged in.
We need all those campuses.
You say, do we, or yes?
We need all of those campuses.
So we may not need all of those campuses, but in order to be successful in urban areas, we have to be multi-campus. We have to be multi-campus in large urban areas for us to be successful, and we have to have very ease of transportation. Now, we may not need all of those campuses that I just named, but we need to be multi-campus. We can't, in large urban centers, we can't just rely on students to get to one single spot.
I think all of our community colleges have more than one campus. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah.
You have something, Mr. Wilson?
Okay, so similar information for our universities. Again, 7 years of cumulative change in the outcomes-based funding formula should be a surprise to no one. Austin P cumulatively leading the pack yet again. But again, a good news story here is the performance of UTC. Not only have they been the leader for the university system in the last 2 years, if you look at in 13-14, they trailed the overall funding level by about 3%. So they not only were trailing institutions, but they were below what the overall cumulative change was across the higher ed sector. Since then, they have increased their outcomes exponentially and are now the second-ranked university cumulatively for funding awarded through the funding formula. We think this is a great indication that interventions on campuses can lead to success and the funding formula will reward you for that. Also of interest here, all 9 universities are now positive with this recommendation. So cumulatively, all 9 of our universities will now be above where they started in 10-11 for their funding. And that concludes the appropriation section. Dr. Deaton?
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. A few wrap-up comments. And Crystal, can you go back to the UTC components analysis slide real quick? I want to put the number in context that she showed us. The 6-year graduation rate increase, $650,000 or so, attributable to their increase in graduation rate. To put that in numbers, over a 4-year period from 2010 to 2000, I guess 5-year period, 2010 to 2015, their graduation rate went from 48% to right at 60%. That's a remarkable jump. And other schools have had a similar increase as well, but that's where largely that money comes from. That's where they have really moved that needle in ways that are quite dramatic. Another point, Dr. DiPietro asked a question at a previous meeting about putting in the $48 million in context. This is about a $2.8 billion enterprise, just the unrestricted portion. If you measure the increased recommendation we have, 48 million as a percentage of that overall, it's right under 2%. That's historically about where we have been. And so we are more or less over time keeping pace with trying to grow the bottom line by about the same percentage funding over the years, and the $40 million reflects that. What separates Tennessee in this recommendation is that all money is back up for grabs. The unique nature of the Tennessee model is that every dollar has to be, you have to compete for it every year anew. Nothing is guaranteed to you. As other states struggle with how to either change or implement outcomes funding, they struggle to have conversations which get much north of 10%, and every dollar here is back up for grabs every year. That's a unique feature of what we do. Per FNA instructions, there is a 2% reduction scenario included in your materials. That is a planning number. They've asked all state agencies to project just in case. We have dutifully done that. It is included as an information item in your materials. But the bulk of the recommendation is as Crystal described. And Mr. Chairman, at this point, we would entertain questions or indeed a motion.
Any questions? Any discussion? I will entertain a motion.
To approve the recommendation.
Treasurer Lillard, do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Wilson. Please call the roll.
Chairman Coe.
Aye.
Dr. Dishner. Secretary Hargett.
Aye.
Ms. Kadir. Ms. Cogan.
Aye.
Mr. Lee. Treasurer Lillard.
Aye.
Ms. Roach. Aye. Mayor just left. Comptroller Wilson.
That's my job.
Yes, sir.
Keith Wilson.
Aye.
9 ayes, 1 abstention.
Very good.
Motion carried.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Just this moment, can I say a word of appreciation to Russ and to Crystal, Stephen, all the fiscal staff at THEC for, they're very transparent. They work with us, and I just appreciate their work ethic as we come towards this recommendation. Just wanted to call that out to each of them.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for doing it, and I will tell you, this work does not get done 8 to 4:30. This is a staff that is here whenever they need to be here to get it done. If you come in here on a Sunday in the last 8 weeks, you would have found them here. And so thank you for recognizing them.
Very good. All right, moving on to item number 5, the 2017-2018 student fee recommendations.
And on this, Mr. Chairman, I'll also ensure this and ask Crystal to go through the details. This is item 5 in your notebooks, as noted. A couple of things about this, and I'll go through a sort of financial aid profile for the state as we get into how then tuition interacts with financial aid. But also, Focus Act introduces a new element for us this year, as Director Krause alluded to earlier. The recommendations before you today are still just guidance, and we would suggest and recommend that the Commission hold off on adopting binding ranges until the springtime when there is clarity on the state budget. So what's before you today is just simply a guidance recommendation. As Crystal said earlier, this is linked to the previous item on the operating funding. We think these go hand in hand as they travel in a package. I do have the clicker. I'm not sure it'll click from back here. Why don't you advance me? One more slide.
Skipping that one.
Yeah. So a little bit of profile. So just to review, there is an abundance of financial aid money in Tennessee's system. The lottery scholarship program itself pushing $1/3 billion. The state's need-based grant currently at $80 million, with the recommendation just approved, hopefully going up close to $100. Promise itself will add upwards of $30 million or so when the data is tabulated. There's a lot of money in financial aid. The policy challenge for the state, though, is how to link that money to the state's goals to drive to 55 and reconceptualizing how those funds can best meet needs where they are. TSAA, but especially lottery, were designed in an era when completion was not the state's policy imperative, as it is now. And that needs to get rethought as we move ahead in the coming years. The bottom two points are important as well. On the data that the U.S. has access to, we can see Tennessee data. On average debt and cohort default rates, Tennessee performs pretty well. One of the lowest default or average debt levels in the U.S. And our default rate is about average. Those two data points, though, have a lot of blind spots. That average debt number is only for graduates. It does not include those who do not get a degree. I would submit with a mountain of evidence behind me that one of the most acute challenges we face is the debt but no degree population, who are both saddled with debt, likelier to default and have no degree, and are much more likely to be unemployed. We have to get better at that. We have to have more data about that. That's a challenge for us going forward. And the cohort default rate is a very limited, somewhat useful, but a very limited slice, limited look at who is defaulting on loans. It measures 3 years out from when you separate from a campus. It does not track you over your lifetime. It almost paints a bit of a false positive picture of the true nature of default and the debt problems students have. But the data we do have, we look okay, but we are in constant search for better sources of data and a better window into the policy problems that Tennessee and the nation face. With that, Crystal, let me ask you to go through our tuition recommendations.
Sure. So before we get to the recommendation guidance, just as again some background information available on tuition here in Tennessee, average annual increases over the last 5 years for our three sectors. So for our universities, community colleges, and Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology. Let's start with the TCATs, this 4.2%. The good news here is that because of our financial aid programs, so Tennessee Promise as well as the Wilder Navy Scholarship, those are keeping up with these 4.2% increases, and so many students who are attending our TCATs do not actually have out-of-pocket tuition and fee costs. So again, 4.2% increase. It's on a small base, so we're doing okay there. Our community colleges, 3.6% increase on average over the last 5 years. This is the lowest in, I went back and I looked, we have online back to the 80s, and this is the lowest average over a 5-year period that we've had since 1980. So again, that is to our institutions, to the TBR system, to keep those tuition increases low for our students attending our community colleges. And one point about the university increase here, so 5.2% on average over each of the last 5 years. A couple of our institutions have instituted tuition differentiation policies, and this is important because, for instance, UT Knoxville, there was the comment earlier, I think it was Dennis brought this up, that we're going to need to differentiate not necessarily just between sectors, but also maybe even between institutions. And I think UT Knoxville is a good example of this. And I believe it was in the fall of 12 at your board meeting, you instituted your finish in 4, 15 to finish. Yeah. And so what this policy does is, what it did was UT was charging for 12 hours, regardless of how many hours you took. If you were a full-time student, you paid for 12, you could take 18. And to encourage students to complete on time, they moved that to charging for 15 hours. What that looks like in our 5-year average is a 25% increase, when really you're paying for 15 hours rather than 12. The majority of your students you found were taking 15 hours anyway, right? They were at 14.9 or even before you were charging for that. So that coupled with Martin's new program, SOAR in 4, which charges differentiated tuition, whether you have fewer than 60 hours or more than 60 hours, is probably affecting this. It's probably weighting this in a way that is not actually what's happening on our campuses. It's probably not 5.2% on average over the last 5 years. It's probably lower than that. Not to say that those aren't very real costs that are being felt by students, but again, it is resulting in students completing on time and in a timelier fashion. One of the things we do expect with focus is to see more of these differentiated policies as institutions, these locally governed institutions, are able to think more strategically or may choose to think more strategically about their tuition and fee policies.
We are also, as of immediately, officially a 15 to finish state. David Wright's been leading those efforts with Complete College America. If students want to graduate in 4 years, they got to take 15 hours. And disseminating that outside of UT, who's really focused on it, and a few, I think also the TBR universities, is going to be important work. And then Crystal's point on differential tuition, and with Dr. White and Dr. Oldham here, I'll say, if there's anything we've heard from the locally governed institutions that they are excited about, is the capacity to say, we know it costs more to train engineers, so we're probably going to charge a little more. We'll see more of it. Also, we will always try to maintain, I think, an appropriate focus here to make sure we're not increasing the cost burden too much. But in the fields of business, nursing, and engineering, there is room to grow at most of our four-year universities. And so the ability for those schools to reach out and do that is something I think we anticipate seeing, and I'm seeing nods generally.
Again, just to provide some context, these are the average annual tuition and fee rates for full-time attendance in 16-17 for our institutions. The average for universities is just under $9,000. And again, this includes weighted differentiated tuition for UT Knoxville and weighted differentiated tuition for UT Martin. Our community colleges, just under $4,225, and then our Tennessee colleges of applied technology, just over $3,600. Again, internally, these look great. Really, what we care about is what these look like compared to peer institutions and to our border states, and where students are finding, the best bang for their buck, like they may get at UT Martin. And so, what do these look like compared to peers? And I'm going to caveat this by saying, before anyone has a coronary, these peer groups are different than probably individual institutions have identified as their peer groups. This was a long and soul-searching process that occurred probably many years ago and probably should be revisited, because we know that many of our institutions have undergone strategic initiatives, master plans, strategic plans that maybe means that some of these peers are not necessarily their peers anymore. But for the purposes of this conversation, looking specifically, say, at TSU, well, anyone who has a Tennessee rank of 1 to 7, that means that their average tuition is above their peers, while those ranked 8 to 16 means that their average tuition is below their peers. So if we were to look at, say, TSU, a Tennessee rank of 8, you'll notice that they are at 9%. Their average tuition and fees in 16-17 of $7,567 was about 9% below the peer average for their group. Their peer average includes like Georgia State, Florida A&M, and others. You can see the peer max and minimum. And so what this says to us is that TSU, compared to their peers in the region, remains very affordable.
When do you think we'll update that peer list? Because it feels important.
Ask Dennis. He's. Am I wrong in this was an NCHIMS process or a lead process? Yeah. Yeah.
It was 2003 that we went through this, and yeah, exactly, that was pretty good. Yeah, and it does need to get revisited. It is an arduous process, and it used to have consequence too, because the peers used to have a salary element from SRAB that factored heavily into the old formula. So the stakes will be lower in the new discussion, but it is time.
And if I may, it may be more important as you think about this to compare your tuition against family income or household income in the peer states rather than take a look at institutional tuition, because at the end of the day, the question is how affordable, again, are these tuitions given the family's ability to pay it, and that changes, and look at it not just median family income in the state. Take a look at the low quintile family income, because those those are important, but they also vary enormously. Particularly the low quintile income varies enormously from state to state. And so just looking at peers doesn't give you a real good fix on can families afford whatever you're charging.
Comptroller.
Go further, follow that further. Scholarships and surveillance. Nervous about it.
But even within the states, you're going to have some big discrepancies, some big swings there. I mean, the affordability in Martin, Tennessee is a lot different than affordability in Nashville.
And again, the real importance of need-based aid, because, when you start looking at family income, every state I've ever looked at, county by county, it varies by about 300% from the lowest family income county to the highest. So affordability is really geographic based.
So moving on to our 17-18 tuition guidance recommendations. Again, reiterating what both Director Krause and Dr. Deaton have said earlier. As part of Focus, this is guidance. In previous years, when we've talked about this and voted on it, it was implicitly guidance because we would provide a range, and then the governing boards, the Tennessee Board of Regents, and then UT would go out and try and stay within our range, but they weren't beholden to that through state law. That has now changed because of Focus. And so today, with these guidance recommendations, the main point here is to provide some flexibility for the commission, because again, it is the first year we're doing it. We want to provide flexibility, waiting on to see what the budget will look like that comes out of the legislature here later in 2017 in the spring. But we also present this as a package deal with our $48 million to think of affordability as those two things working in concert, and looking at all the mitigating factors and trying to maintain or improve affordability for our students. We are providing a tuition guidance recommendation of 0 to 4% across all public higher education sectors. And so, Dr. Deaton.
So one final point, the springtime decision the commission will make per the language of Focus is to issue binding guidance on two numbers. One is the maintenance fee, the tuition, the main fee that every undergraduate resident pays, and it's just applicable to those students. So the guidance will not be applicable to out-of-state tuition, graduate tuition, just undergraduate residents. The second number is the sum total tuition and mandatory fees. That number you will also then issue binding guidance on as well. Not getting into which fee can go up at which level, but just that sum total has to be within a range. Those two numbers per Focus.
I have a question on what the definition perhaps of a mandatory fee is. I got an education on fees from one of my employees who shared her son's tuition bill. And I was curious whether, I understand there's a differential in cost in providing this degree compared to that degree. And if you're an engineering student, there are fees associated with that that are, exclusive to that degree program. Is that considered a mandatory fee for the purpose of this discussion, or is it only those fees which every student pays?
Yeah. So differential program fees would be outside of our guidance, outside of our binding range.
There is guidance on how those differentiated fees are actually utilized, that they go direct to that program?
Most of the time when the governing board institutes those, that is a stipulation. So the revenue stays with that college or program.
We would know that,
not
Mr.
from us,
Wilson.
though.
And that is decided by the governing board of that. Okay.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, we would answer further questions or propose the adoption.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Chair will entertain a motion. Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Coben. Please call the roll.
Chairman Coe.
Aye.
Dr. Dishner. Secretary Hardy.
Aye.
Ms. Kadir. Ms. Coben. Aye. Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard.
Aye.
Ms. Roach.
Aye.
Comptroller Wilson? Mr. Keith Wilson?
Aye.
We have 10 ayes, motion carried.
Very good. Item number 6, 2017-18 capital project recommendations.
Yeah, this is the last of the three components, Mr. Chairman, members. This is an item 6 in your notebooks. 2 points of note before Crystal gets into the details. One is a tweak that was made in the process for this cycle, and then secondly, talk about next cycle. In lieu of the transition to the Focus Act, we talked to Chancellor Gregory and his staff about the TBR capital list rather than being presented in a manner with community college, TCAT, and university projects throughout, to instead separate those lists to have a university outlay request list and then a community college TCAT request list, 2 lists from TBR that we would then merge with the UT list to form what is before you, basically giving us 3 buckets from which to choose. We appreciate the cooperation about that, and I think that worked out well. That is a bit of a prelude to next cycle when the boards will have been stood up, and at that point they'll be giving projects to us on their own. We'll have 8 different lists to merge into a single list, 6 from the newly independent schools, UT and TBR. That will require a different thought process, a different set of policies that we hope to bring you sometime early 2017 to adopt and consider. That will force us to rethink how we go about the capital prioritization process. We are heavily engaged in that now in our spare time. We are engaging with folks from around the U.S. and thinking through how other states tackle this problem, asking consultants what are the best practices out there, just trying to get a read on what questions have we never asked ourselves that we should, or what is it that we're doing that we ought to continue, basically just almost starting over. And again, that process will come to fruition next year. It'll be before this body sometime next year for adoption, and then use this time next year. So with that, Crystal, let me ask you to get into the details, please.
So this is, as Dr. Deaton said, action item number 6. Basically, pretty much all of the capital outlay I'm about to discuss with you is on page 4. And then when we get into capital maintenance, that is on pages 6 and 7. Again, these recommendations were made in similar processes that we've used in previous years. We are recommending today capital outlay 12 total projects totaling $339.7 million in state appropriations. I think it's fair to say that this is more than we normally recommend, and I think the reason for doing that is because we had a lot of really good projects to look at this year, and so we wanted to give the governor and his staff and you all the opportunity to see them and see what institutions are requesting to do on their campuses. Of these 12 projects, 10 are TBR projects totaling $191 million, and 2 UT projects totaling $149 million. I'll draw your attention to the number 1, to the first UT project that is being recommended, the UT Martin new classroom building, their STEM building. I know Dr. DiPietro has been at many of these meetings talking about how this building is very much needed at Martin. And one of the things that occurred in last year's legislative cycle was that the match requirement for UT Martin was reduced from 25% to 10%. Most of our universities are required to provide match 25% on the first $75 million of their projects. Martin has received a special dispensation for only 10%. So I just wanted to point that out if you see their match and it looks low compared to other institutions. Additionally, as Stephen pointed out during the D55 discussion, there are 3 projects on this list that have, in some way, shape, or form, an overlap or partnership with projects that were approved earlier today as part of the capacity fund. That includes wharf building renovation at Volunteer. That's actually a partnership project. It's not an overlap. They're doing 2 different things, and I think we've had discussions with Volunteer as well as TBR that should you decide to recommend that project and should it be funded by the governor and the legislature, that they are prepared to take up both of those projects and meet the requirements of both of them simultaneously. Additionally, at numbers 9 and 10, TCAT Knoxville and TCAT Memphis, you'll notice just by the size of the project cost that this is a larger scope for these two projects than was approved in the D55 capacity fund earlier today. And if we are lucky enough that the governor and legislature are able to dip this low on the list, we would come back to the commission for recommendations on how to deal with those two projects since they'll be receiving D55 funds. Any questions about capital outlay? Just briefly, we've started in the last few years identifying projects and telling you how long we've been seeing them. I think we've seen a turn in the tide. Used to, this list was overrun with projects that have been on the list for 10 or more years. And what we're finding this year is that we're getting, maybe we've gotten through those projects that have been sitting and waiting for 10 or more years. Certainly, if we are able to get through the first two, we will have gotten everybody out from the aughts. So that's always good news. We always like to see recommendations from institutions that are more immediate and are maybe responding more specifically to their current master plans, institutional needs, and Drive to 55 needs. So we're happy to see some new and fresh projects on the list this year for recommendation. Lastly, capital maintenance. And again, our capital maintenance projects are identified on pages 6 and 7 in this attachment. We are recommending $163.9 million for our maintenance projects, and I believe, I'm going to have to look at the total number of projects that is. Yes, 84, thank you. So 84 projects for $163.9 million. So maintenance projects, as you'll recall, this includes boiler replacement, HVAC updates, campus-wide paving, security system updates, roof replacements, and others. Basically the things that everybody is clamoring to have named after them. So, it's always important to us that, I mean...
Let us talk about the importance of HVAC with Mr. Lee.
I would be remiss to say that there is not money in HVAC replacement, or that it's not important for sure. But as far as being able to rely on, say, private gifts or funding from outside sources to continue these maintenance projects or address deferred maintenance on our campuses, I think our institutions would have a difficult time. That's why we are thankful that Tennessee, unlike many states across the country, Tennessee does have a dedicated funding stream and has in the last several years received on average $65 million from the state in order to address these maintenance issues. And every penny we get lowers the deferred maintenance at our campuses. So we're very thankful for the money received from the state. Last year, just as an aside, we requested about $153.8 million for 99 projects, so not far off from what we're requesting this year. And through legislative action, received about $75 million for 54 of those projects. So again, we're thinking we're going to get about half of what we're asking for here. And the out years information, your notebooks were required by law to provide 5-year outlooks for not only outlay but maintenance. Those are informational items just for you to peruse, looking out to 2022 for possible maintenance and outlay projects at our campuses.
To sum up, this is the last year that we will do capital like this. Please take that away. The focus boards change how we're going to do business. What I think Russ is leading right now with this capital introspection process, and Dennis has been helpful, is we're going to set a little different table. I think you as the commission will see us bringing you, we're still going to bring you a merged list. We think that's inherent upon us. We do not want to give to the General Assembly, well, this is what everybody said they wanted. We want to give to the General Assembly a statement of priorities. We think that's our duty. So we're trying to make sure that we're doing everything possible that next year when we bring you that first prioritized list, we've been able to take into account very technical considerations, and we've been able to take into account, I think, a more recent list. The importance of rolling out of those 2008 projects can't be understated. We're also able to make 2 investments here I want to highlight. The Motlow State addition is huge. That is a campus that was crowded the first day it opened. And the UT Energy Services building. That nuclear engineering facility is nationally, if not internationally, recognized. There's no doubt it's a large investment, but it's one we advocated for last week in front of the governor and think this is, if we can get it done this year, it's important.
Very good.
Chairman, that concludes the Capital Rec. If I can take the moment to thank Crystal Collins, Stephen Gentile, and Taylor Odell. Taylor, wave your hand. I don't know if you've been introduced to us yet. For all the work they did to make all this happen. Appreciate, and echoing what Chancellor Gregory said, this is their product.
Very good. All right. Have any further questions or comments?
Move approval of the recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank
I'll
you.
second
Mr.
that.
Treasurer, have a second. Thank you. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Cope.
Aye.
Dr. Dishner. Secretary Hargett. Ms. Kadir. Ms. Coben.
Aye.
Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard.
Aye.
Ms. Roach.
Aye.
Comptroller Wilson.
Abstain.
Keith Wilson.
Aye.
We have 9 ayes and 1 member abstained. Motion carried.
Very good. Thank you. The last item on our agenda is the schedule of meetings, and I think Mike is going to discuss that in addition to a couple other housekeeping matters.
Absolutely. So we have coming around, is there a stack moving of the?
Right here, except, oh, it does have a change.
Yes, sir. A slight change. Our coming year, we know this is important to go ahead and get on your calendar. Let me talk about the hole in the schedule right now. And by the way, the things that are on here, January, May, please note, May is a new time interval for us to meet because of the Focus Act. And November, we have all confirmed with your assistance that this works for most of the commission, so I want to be clear. Summer is to be determined and will probably be determined today or tomorrow. We just weren't quite ready, and that's because Dr. Hayburn and I, historically, the joint state board meeting would have been in January. Like you all, in January, we're thinking of a whole lot of things, mostly relative to the General Assembly. And we're not able to give that state board joint meeting its due. So we would propose to move that to July. And Sarah is coordinating with her board. We'll coordinate with you all. And I think we're going to have a really meaningful discussion. If I had to guess, it might be about teacher preparation, but that's
On the agenda.
just some foresight there. So again, we have tried to work with your assistance to make sure these dates work now. And as soon as we have the summer date, we will let you know. You may have noticed the lack of information items on the agenda. That is because, one, we want to make sure you get back to your offices quickly. But two, we do want to continue to communicate with you about what our staff is doing. So in meetings that have maybe a less weighty agenda, we'll be able to hear about certain information items. But in the meantime, I hope you'll find your quarterly update. This is much of what you would have heard about in the information items. Kate, Derek is somewhere probably live tweeting in the back. Kate put this together. I do urge you to read it because it encompasses the work that everybody on our team is doing, and we also think it helps us save some time at meetings and be able to adjourn in a timely fashion. Finally, I want to say these meetings do not happen on their own. I want to thank Corsania, if you're lurking, and Rosie, lurking in the back, as they always are, working and getting stuff done. Thank you to you two. Thank you to Carol Ann as well. We really appreciate everybody's time. Mr. Chairman, it is 1:20.
Very good. Any other comments, business?
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Do we have a second? All in favor can say aye.
Aye.
Very good.
Well done.